So I'll call this meeting to order. From the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for coming. I should tell you guys, I got feedback that people online cannot understand me, specifically me, and so apparently I talked too fast. So I will try to speak slower, and I will be very conscientious of how I speak.
You're very soft spoken,
And very soft spoken too, yeah.
and I have trouble hearing you in the rooms.
And so, you know,
I would say if you kept your voice up, you'd be just fine.
that was the other feedback. I speak too softly and too fast, which is, nobody understands me. So I will try and be more conscientious. And I will forget what I need to say, so. This will not be a good experiment. I'll start with roll call.
Okay, I can't see who's online.
Leanne.
And that's it.
Leanne,
Are there-
is Meg on
What
it?
else? No.
Okay, so Meg doesn't feel well, so she may not be on.
And I think
Susan
Sue
may
is
not be on.
somewhere in Texas.
Yeah.
Or if I could make it up.
No.
She took off. 45 minutes later, they came
Okay.
back.
Oh,
I
that's the
know.
longest trip ever.
That's
Yeah,
terrible.
I know.
Turns into a 2-week ordeal.
Next item, or the minutes that we need to take action on, there are 4 minutes listed. We did not get all 4 minutes in, so I think Jerry sent out minutes for the January 20th meeting and the January 27th meeting. The 28th and 29th will be postponed to another date. And so, hopefully you guys all had a chance to read them. They're all going to be online now because, they're too long to print. So I need a motion to.
I'll make a motion. We approve the minutes as presented from January 20th and January 27th.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you, Chair. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public comments. Are there anybody else?
Hold on.
There's nobody else online. Thank you very much. There's a large audience here. Karina,
They're on the board, but
everything. Jane, okay. But no comment at this point. Very good. And so the next item on the agenda, is the fiscal year 26-27 budget reviews, and the Board of Ed is the only presented tonight. So it's all yours. Thank you for coming. Before you guys start though, I do want to thank both you and Pam for sending us all the information so quickly. Very much appreciated in sending both Friday and the updated version on Monday. That's a lot of work. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having us and thank you. Hello, and I'm Chris for those of you who are new. It's nice to meet you for the first time and see some people who are returning. Like you, Mr. Chang, I got feedback that sometimes I talk quickly as well, but the feedback is from my wife if she watches this. So you need to slow down. So I will, in an effort to make sure that we provide you enough time for questions, I will try to go through this as quickly as I can. Being conscious that sometimes I talk too fast, and my partner over here reminds me on occasion that I also talk too fast when I get excited about stuff too, so I will try. But obviously, we're here this evening to present the Board of Education's proposed budget. Obviously, this is never a fun process for anyone, particularly when there's a large request. So what we try to appreciate, George had sent over some initial questions when we sent the information over, so we tried to incorporate that. So the presentation you have in your packets has been altered a bit as late as this afternoon to try to make sure we provided you with as much information for some of the inquiries that we had prior to this evening. So I will start, and we do have obviously members of the Board of Education here as well. If there's any questions for them, but I will try to go through this to make sure we afford everyone as much as possible time for questions as you have. Typically, we go through and talk about our programs and we pull them out in the beginning of it. Because this has been a little bit different with the board strategic plan process, we sort of reference the individual schools for the end. So this is just a placeholder to remind you that we have 3 schools. The important part, the culmination of really what we do is where our kids end up when they leave us. So this is data from the class of 2025, and what we're preparing our kids for. So as you can see, there's within the pie chart, there's different avenues that our kids explore when they pass through that stage in June over at Old Saybrook High School. Whether it's college, university, trade school, transition programs, that's typically for our special education students ages 18 to 22, employment or the military. And then you see 82.8% of the class of 2025 opted to go to college or university. 8% went to employment. Should be a little asterisk. Employment used to be you graduate high school and you went to work. Nowadays, there could be things that didn't exist when I was a kid, like a gap year, or kids trying, maybe not necessarily enrolling directly in school, but that's all lumped in based on the data that we have. 3.4% of our kids are in the transition program, and 5.7% of our graduating class last year entered the military.
Which is trade school in that category?
Grade school would be built into that 8%.
The-
So either employment and or trade school. I probably, did it not stick out on here?
Hmm.
There's a thing on my,
You have it on the left.
it's on the left.
Yeah.
It may have,
But it's not colored.
it's not, it would be built into the yellow
Yeah.
with
Okay.
employment, so I
Yeah.
apologize, it must have got lost in translation
Alright.
through the last part. That's them. This is the class of 2025, and at the bottom, this is just a snapshot of some of the places that our kids chose to attend when they left Old Saybrook High School after last year. It doesn't cover everyone. But one of the feedback we got was when we list every college or program, and a lot of kids would transfer during their freshman year, so it wasn't reflective, so we just did a broader representation of where our kids went. The budget development process has not changed. We start off with discussions where we discuss goals and challenges with the budget fiscal committee and the board of ed. We review enrollment, our program projections, and we create what we call a sustained services budget, or we maybe reference later as a fixed cost budget. We identify the opportunities for efficiencies and cost savings, then we discuss the needs with all the practitioners throughout our schools. That has not changed. We did have a narrow focus for considerations before this budget ever made it to board finance. And there were really three priorities that were driven from the Board of Education. The first is what we refer to as our fixed cost, which everyone is aware of. That's the traditional cost of doing business. And as you, I'm sure, are experiencing in other areas, costs are increasing. So we knowing that that number was going to be probably higher, we wanted to make sure that we prioritize what those figures were. Last December, this past December, the board adopted unanimously a new 5-year strategic plan. Doesn't take into effect until July 1st, because we're still in the midst of our last plan. But obviously, this is a budget for next fiscal year. So the implications of that plan are embedded in the budget that you're going to see here tonight. And the last priority is what we refer to as curriculum development. And we'll get into it a little bit later. It's in your packet. I can expand on it a bit later. We had an accreditation visit at Old Saybrook High School last year through the NES&C, that's the accreditation agency, and they come back with finding the recommendation. And one of the recommendations that we had was that we need to revise some of our curriculum and our curriculum process and the way that we deliver it. It took us some time because even though we're small, in any district across every discipline, it's a big undertaking. So we really spent some time over the last year sort of identifying what's the biggest impact area that essentially we would need to do correctly as we're rebuilding this. And there was a lot of recommendations as far as how we warehouse curriculum, how we share it with the community. There's unfunded mandates that we have to disclose that to anybody who wants to. We didn't have the infrastructure. We do now, but we're in the process of building it. The emphasis for next school year is going to be what we refer to as English language arts. Simplest from my own benefit, reading. Reading is the foundation for our kids' academic success, pre-K through 12. So we're going to have a district-wide initiative moving forward on strengthening our reading curriculum from top to bottom. So those are really the biggest drivers or categories that the board considered when adopting their proposed budget. But the most important thing when we do anything has to be centered on them. And this was important for us to reiterate as we go through this process. We get in the weeds a bit when we start talking about numbers and dollars, and sometimes we lose focus on what we're all here for. As a reminder to staff, I always tell everyone, and Pam heard this a million times, I'll support any initiative if you think it's good. You know, our staff are wonderful, they're great people, I want them to be happy, but if you bring me something, be prepared to tell me how it's good for kids. If it's just good for you as an adult, that's great. I need to know how it's good for kids because we can't forget what we're here for. And that really is the center of everything that we're asking for. The first question as we go through this budget narrative is, who are we? what makes up our district. Obviously, we have visuals. But this is the elephant in the room. We're small and our enrollment is declining. And I appreciate some of the questions, not just through the budget process, but even through conversations I've had throughout the community is, how do you sustain a district when your enrollment is declining? So this is our historical data over the last 3 years. This is the official October 1 enrollment. So the way the state of Connecticut calculates your official enrollment is whatever your count is on October 1. If it fluctuates, it doesn't matter for that particular school year, it's always October 1st. I am happy to tell you that since October 1, hot off the press about an hour ago, that number has actually increased by 5 students. So we are technically sitting right now at 995. But if you look at the picture, we had a decrease in about 40 students from last October to October 1 of this school year. The other question of who we are is what makes up our student body. We often reference our students with high needs. That's not something that we internally make up, or that's a indication of something that we necessarily create on our own. That's how the state of Connecticut classifies students within your district if they meet particular criteria. There's 3 different criteria in order to be considered a student with high need. Either a student who receives special education services, or students of multi-language learning, meaning English is their second language, or that student receives free and reduced lunch services. Any one of those, and the numbers can be confusing at times because some kids may fall in multiple buckets. That's why if you add up all the columns, I know we're at a budget meeting, they're not going to total, because sometimes kids are duplicate in each particular discipline. But if you look at the data of what we're made up of, obviously we declined 40 students from last October to this October. But when you look at our special education population, even being down 40 students, we had an increase of 13 students district-wide who are now receiving special education students. So our percentage of high needs for special education went from 16.2 to 18.2, even in a year when we had a relatively drastic decrease in total enrollment. Our multi-language learners have decreased from year over year. And our free and reduced lunch numbers have increased from last, we were about 25.3 2 years ago. We took a small dip last year, and then you can see this year we increased back up to over 25%. The total, as you can see, they don't total up because there's multiple kids that are referenced in multiple categories. But our overall percentage as a district, we're classified with the state of Connecticut as 36.3% of our students are designated as being high needs. And what that means is if your kids have high needs, there are additional resources we have to provide for those students. And I appreciate some of the questions. We did not do this at the board level because we have separate conversations. I actually broke it out by school, and I'll try to take it a little bit slower. Because obviously you know this information, but when we're saying it for the first time, sometimes it gets lost in translation. That number is district wide. Every column in yellow, with the exception of this current year, is actual figures. We do not have the actual school percentages for this current fiscal or school year because that number is generated from the state of Connecticut. So the state of Connecticut designates the percentage for the district at 36.3. They won't delineate each individual school until sometime in the spring. So what we says estimate on there, we just took an estimate based on our 36.3%. But when you look at Goodwin in a year of declining enrollment, over the last 2 years, we have, well, technically now that I can share the information of 5 new students coming into that building, our enrollment at Goodwin has actually increased. So we have currently we're sitting at over 400 students at Goodwin School. Within that 399 on the official enrollment, if you look at our special education population, we've increased about 18 kids from year over year. Doesn't seem like a lot if you look at 18 students, but over a 3-year period, we're up almost 5% in our special education population, just at Goodwin School alone. Our multi-language learners have decreased year over year. Last year, we were about 10%. We've decreased down to about 7%. And our free and reduced lunch numbers have trickled down just a bit. But this is the only school that our enrollment went over, so the small dip won't seem that huge. But some of the questions were, we've added some additional, adult support staff over at Goodwin over the last year, particularly in the administration area. The reason for that was looking at the figures that are in front of you. Goodwin is currently our biggest school. We have the highest percentage of kids with high needs in that particular building. And just for content's sake, I know the board's aware of this, when you look at 15% special education in your school, for every student who has an IEP, this does not include 504s, and I won't get to the technical discussion, but if a student has an individual education plan, every time there's a meeting, planning and placement team meeting, there has to be an administrator present at that meeting, coordinating the meeting. So with 400 students and only one administrator in that building at the time, it wasn't becoming feasible any longer based on the size of the building. So I know there were some questions about staffing issues that we incorporated last year, and we wanted to make sure that everybody understood what the rationale was behind those decisions. Moving on to the middle school, that's where we saw the biggest drastic decrease in enrollment, going from 308 to 269. But even within that, you can see our special education population went, decreased by about 10 students, but because the overall enrollment went down, it's not as drastic of a decrease. Our multi-language learners, the total number of students stayed the same, but the percentage is obviously higher because we're operating under a lower total enrollment. And our free and reduced lunch numbers, percentage-wise, picked up just a little bit. Again, conventional wisdom, they think you have less kids, you don't need as much staff. This would be a perfect example to say, yes, we have a lot less kids than we did a year or two ago at the middle school. But I have to caution, as we look at 5-year planning and down the road, the previous slide where we show we have over 400 kids, that's where they're going. They're gonna end up here relatively soon. So that's where we're looking at decisions on how we're gonna operate as a district. We have to look at what we know longitudinally of where these kids are gonna end up. And the last, obviously, is Old Saybrook High School. We did see a decrease in enrollment at Old Saybrook High School this year. However, with our special education population, even with a decrease of almost 18 students year over year, we actually have 5 more students, or another 3%, who qualify for special education services. Our multi-language learning population has pretty much steadied at about 6%. However, our free and reduced lunch population has drastically increased. So we are at 30% free and reduced lunch at Old Saybrook High School.
Can I just ask a
Sure.
clarifying point, the multi-language learners?
Yeah.
Or multilingual learners, I see they go down, and I'm assuming they learn, if they come in an elementary
Yes.
school, for instance. Are they always counted? It looks like they're not, like after the.
No,
proficiency.
once the student, if a student comes here and English is a second language, we basically on the clock for that student to become proficient in English. Once they pass the proficiency,
They're
they're
not
no
included.
longer
Okay.
included. So you will see that the numbers may be higher when they, and if the student enters at Goodwin. Typically, if we're doing our job right, those students will be proficient in English by the time they get, really, it's basically a 2-year clock.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so it could be that students do move in, during their high school years, if they relocate, but that is typically, if your largest population's at Goodwin, by the time they make, those students get to the middle school and the high school, they will no longer be covered.
Thank you.
I referenced the asterisk again on this particular slide, because if you look at Old Saybrook High School last year, we had 39.1% of students with high needs. The 36.3 is the district average. If you look at each category, clearly when that number is official through the state, it is going to be higher, but we wanted to make sure that we included the total, so we were consistent, but we also understand that that number won't be accurate for that particular building. So in all likelihood, just on the increase in free and reduced lunch, that Old Saybrook High School will be in that 40% plus threshold when those numbers are official. We can't give you that until the state officially releases it to us. So when it comes to enrollment, obviously it's a big topic of conversation, not just here, but in the area and in the state of Connecticut. The questions that we deal with on a daily basis of, do you control any of this? Is this just, endemic to the state, to the nation? There are things we don't control. We don't control birth rates. We don't control people aren't having as many babies. We don't control where people are moving when they have kids. So what the board charged me and in turn our staff to do was, what are the challenges that we're having, not just with enrollment, but where we want to go as a district wide before they develop their 5-year plan. And enrollment's a big piece of it, but as you know, we don't control all of it. So what we focused on was, what are the areas that we do have an influence on? And with all of the enrollment data, the only thing that we can have a direct impact on is the data that we know. So this is actual information from last school year. So in June of 2025, our eighth grade class stepped up 85 students at the middle school. On the first day of school this year, only 70 of those students made their way to Old Saybrook High School. So although we don't control overall enrollment data in every state, every district in the state is dealing with it, the board really focused in on what are the areas that we do control, not necessarily to recruit kids in or bring kids back, but how do we stop our kids from leaving it? Unfortunately, we have that data as to why those 15 kids chose to not go on to the high school. We're not judging, nobody did anything wrong. Some of these programs are more suited to where kids' interests are, but what's real is we know that we have 18% of our eighth grade class last year voluntarily chose not to come to Old Saybrook High School. Obviously, we want all of our kids to stay. And the reality is, we have that information because we asked them on their way out the door. We talked to their families, we talked to the students and say, why, where are you going and why? These are what I refer to as our competition. And again, I know these people, they're wonderful people. Obviously, we want to retain our own students, but these are the options that our kids have. These are the most popular choices that our eighth graders choose to go to for high school. There are reasons for that. We can't necessarily compete with our competitors, and I'll use some of the tech schools for an example, because they're specialized in what they do. We're a small high school, as you know, 300 kids. We can't recreate what a Grasso or a Vinyl has. But one of the things that the board charged us with was, how do we give those kids some incentive to, who may not be fully committed to wanting to go to one of those programs, enough here where they'll want to stay. There's also a misconception when your enrollment's going down that people assume that, okay, well, those kids are leaving. Yeah, it stinks that they're not staying, but we don't have to pay for them any longer. With the exception of 2 of those institutions on that list, that is not 100% accurate. If an Old Saybrook student decides to go to a magnet school, we still are responsible to pay that tuition. Although the tech schools may be tuition free, we as a community are still responsible to drive those kids to that school. So there is money in your budget from last year and from this year for students who live here, but don't attend our schools, but there are costs to that. I mentioned that because when we talked about the needs of our kids, any student who's designated as a student of high need, particularly for special education, if a student attends a magnet school and they're an Old Saybrook resident, Old Saybrook Public Schools is still responsible to cover the special education costs for that student, even though they're not participating in one of our buildings and programs. So sometimes there's a misconception that the kids are gone, we don't have any financial obligation. That's not necessarily true. That said, this was the first area that the board sort of honed in on and said, okay, what are we hearing from these kids as to why they're choosing to go somewhere else? Again, not judging, it's not for everyone, but that's one of the areas that we could have influence on. Not perfect, but we can try.
So do you know how many went to Mercy or Xavier or the others?
Yeah, we have the data broken out.
Because Mercy and Xavier are struggling mightily also.
Yeah, we have actually seen this year, it's real weird, students return from one of those.
I mean, they're struggling. I mean, Mercy's way down.
A lot of folks are down.
Xavier's enrollment has been struggling for years.
We have seen, again, and we're talking about 15 kids too, so it's not like it's a big percentage for us, but it's still 15 kids overall. But enrollment, and again, there's a cost for that for families if they want to go to a Mercy or an Xavier. So, and there's also another component of they're not close. So if you're a 14-year-old kid and you make a commitment to go to Xavier, you're on Route 9 every morning for an hour. And then if you do extracurriculars, especially in the winter time, you're not getting home till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then you have to go back at 6 o'clock in the morning the next day. So it's a big commitment for a student to choose to go somewhere else. And that's also, we have VOTEC schools as well. We can't compete. If we have a student, we talked to one student who wanted to be a vet and was an 8th grader last year and was really into, equestrian. We can't, obviously, we're never going to compete with that. But looking at what the interest level of our kids are to make them want to incentivized to stay here was really the priority that the board directed us to.
Chris, the transportation piece too, you're mandated by the state to do that, right?
Yes,
Right.
I actually got today, I haven't shared it with the board yet, but I will ask the board if they want me to share that along. The annual unfunded mandate list came out this morning. It's pretty lengthy, it's a huge document, but I will typically send that to the board, just especially during budget season, like, don't forget, you have to pay for all this stuff, even if you don't want to. I haven't shared it with the board, I just got it today, but if I will run it through the board, and if they would like me to share with you, I'd be more than happy to be transparent. That sort of phased into the next portion of how we got to this point was, what are the expectations of the community? I understand we're a community as a whole, but really our demographics are the school community. So we asked them. But not only did we ask the kids who were leaving, we polled every student in the district from grade 3 through 12, every staff member in the district, and every parent in the district. A survey of, what are your expectations of the district? If we're gonna, we're kind of at a crossroads where we're losing kids, we wanna refocus on what, trying to retain our kids. But we can't really do that in a vacuum. And the board was very patient with me when I went out to gather this information, and this wasn't just in surveys. This was a culmination of every conversation, every community conversation that I had that we note down, every private conversation that I had with parents or kids on sidelines, in addition to the surveying that we formally sent out through the district. And what we got back in return was the expectations that we would create career pathways and real world learning. And this is all in your packet, so I won't bore you reading it all. Real world learning, life skills and readiness, expanded course offerings, particularly in STEM, business and trades, balance of rigor and creativity, and belonging and engagement. Those three demographics, I want to say the most important one, but I guess I can say it. The most impactful data that I've received back came from the top part of that triangle, was from conversations that I had with our kids. What that culminated to was, now what do we need? About a month ago, the board adopted a new 5-year strategic plan, as I referenced earlier. That plan is based on 4 pillars, and the plan is also in your document, so we won't bore you with reading the whole thing. But those 4 pillars within that plan are what's on the screen in front of you. Build a sense of belonging and RAM identity, opportunities for interest, discovery, and exploration, develop academic skills and readiness, and provide real-world learning and partnerships. That is the foundation of the plan that the board just adopted. Just going to focus on the first piece for example, where it says build a sense of belonging and RAM identity. That is primarily driven from our students. And I can prove it, and I couldn't prove this a week ago, that I have a group of students that I meet with, that Joe Anastasio, the principal of Saybrook High School, and I, we meet with monthly, but we get into meeting a little bit more. And the seniors of that group had approached us at one of the meetings and said, can we get a cord? When kids graduate, they get honor cords. There's also cord, it becomes convoluted because now every club has a cord, everyone's cord. So they asked us, can we have a cord for the group? We said, we'll look into it, but it kind of gets a little convoluted because there's so many cords out there and kids look like Mr. T going across the right. Which is 2 kids after the meeting approached Joe and I privately and said, we've been talking about this. We don't know if it's realistic, but it would be really neat if we had a pin. Like, we've never had a pin that represents our school. So I have one. They haven't gotten it yet. It just came in. But this, I didn't ask for this. I didn't design it. The kids did. The kids told us what they wanted. But that sense of belonging and their explanation on why they wanted a pin was because they were proud to be an Old Saybrook High School brand. And they wanted to show that when they walk across the stage that they were part of something that they had a pin for. So that information is real. We didn't make any of this stuff up. This is all the information that we gathered throughout this process. I finally had a prop for one of these budget conversations, so I wanted to make sure that I included it. But it poses a challenge. How do we balance our needs, our fixed costs, where we want to go with a reasonable budget request? And I understand reasonable is subjective when you look at some of the figures that we're talking about. So going back to where we started, sometimes we refer to as sustained services fixed costs. For the purpose of delineating this, we're referring to fixed costs. So when we just if we replicate everything that we have currently have now, and just roll that over in the next year, we're looking at a fixed cost dollar amount of 6.21. Those who are keeping score from last year, when we stood in front of you last year, that number was 5.21. So overall, the cost of just continuing to operate the way we did is up at least 1%. So that's where we sort of started with, how much money do we need to just continue doing it, what we're doing? Nothing new, nothing less, just how much do we need to continue? We told you we kept the same process. When we go out and ask those initial requests, we talk to all of our stakeholders within the district and we ask everybody what it is that they believe that they need. The initial request came in at 11.32. I'm fairly certain, even with some new friends in the room, that if I had that number in front of you today, we wouldn't have been as welcome as we were when Pam and I first sat down. So we knew that was not something that was reasonable, but that's really where the work began. Going back to who we are, what do we need, where are we going? You have the plan. I won't belittle the plan the entire time, but the board has set forth a vision on where the district needs to go based on what the expectations and the data has been, is creating those pathways for all three of our schools, for all of our kids. So that information is in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions I can about it, but in the essence of time, I won't repeat what's already in there. I just would like to highlight this. When we go back to that slide about our competitors, one thing that's pretty consistent is a lot of the programs and options that our kids have. Those programs have a niche. We talk about tech school. We can't replicate what a tech school would have, but the tech school has an advantage over us because they're specialized in that. What we discovered is that we don't necessarily have a niche, but we still have to offer a comprehensive program for all of our students. So based on the feedback, based on what we've heard from kids, there's an opportunity for us to create a school within a school model, which isn't unique necessarily to the state of Connecticut. It is unique to the shoreline. And currently there's only one high school in the state of Connecticut that actually has a school of business inside of their high school. So that's where this conversation began. I'm gonna jump ahead because as recent hot off the presses last Tuesday night, the Board of Education gave permission for us to create new courses for the immediate course catalog for the fall of 2026. The reason that there is a sense of urgency to get those new courses approved, because I don't have the authority to just say we're going to offer principles of business. The Board of Education has to approve that. The reason that we had sent all of these courses to the board for initial approval with the promise that we know we can't offer everything. But there really was an audience of one particular group, the current 8th grade class at the middle school, because on January 27th, when the board adopted this, a lot of those students have to make decisions on where they're going to go next year. And we had strategically planned to meet with the 8th grade team as they're finalizing their acceptance letters or where they're going to go, to say, before you make that decision, just so you're aware, we are in the process of trying to develop some of the courses that you asked us and had an interest in doing. We did say it under the guise of, we can't promise this is all gonna happen. Before you make that decision, if you're interested in something, this is now a possibility because the board has endorsed it. It's gonna be dependent upon enrollment, it's gonna be dependent upon student interest. But we wanted to make sure our kids understood that these were possible courses for them to be considering when they go into the high school next year. The other sense of urgency, and I referenced the PIN, that same group of kids actually accompanied us during that conversation with our 8th graders. So I started the conversation with the 8th graders, and then 5 of our student reps from Old Saybrook High School took the microphone from me and ran the meeting with their 8th grade colleagues. And basically told them about what a wonderful experience it is to come to Old Saybrook High School. And I know you may have other interests, but you really should give us a shot. That was more impactful than me or Joe or Chris DeBachman standing in front of these kids saying, no, you really should stay here. But the sense of urgency was our course catalog and our program of studies has to get approved by the end of January. So the board was very accommodating to, in theory, approve these courses. We're still in the process of developing some of the more specifics, but to get them as a placeholder in the course catalog, so these incoming 9th graders will know what could be available to them next year. We've also added some courses at the middle school for next year, all done with this existing stuff. Part of the expectations that we heard back from the community were upgrades in the facilities. A lot of these competitors, if you have an opportunity to go see some of these other programs, a lot of them are new facilities. We're not asking for new buildings. Made that very clear to the first selectman when I got it. I'm not gonna ask him for a new school. But one of the things that we heard back from kids, that's the main entryway at the high school. So prior to December break, our kids took a tour of the high school, and that's the entryway that they went through. And a lot of the feedback we heard was it's pretty dark, a lot of brick. And then they go tour these other facilities, and in their minds, they're more modern. So we basically threw some paint on the wall. We bought a ficus. It's not real. We put some rugs in, and for a number of reasons. One is when those kids came back on January 5th, we wanted to let them know, like, hey, we heard you. You know, you said loud and clear that you want a fresh look. It's only one hallway. It wasn't a major job, but we wanted to make sure that, you know, we're making an effort to address some of the things that you told us. The other piece was, we knew we had that meeting on the 29th with our 8th grade team. Ironically, the 8th graders were coming to the high school on the 30th for the Chris Herron presentation. And we wanted to make sure that when the kids walked through the main entryway, it looked different from the last time they were there. So in a month, we were able to just slap some paint and rugs on the wall. But the response that we got, and I stood there on January 5th as the kids came in, and I heard the response from the kids. Kids were like, wow, this looks great. This is, you know, I mean, some of the student reps at the board reported back to the board how thrilled they were. It was just paint. The last piece, and that's the big piece, is our curriculum development. I mentioned earlier, we were notified through our accreditation process that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to revising and rebuilding our curriculum. That's gonna require us to purchase some new materials, refocus staff. So we'll get into certified staff in a moment, but I just wanna make sure anything that's on here, we're not asking for new people. We're gonna try to do with what we currently have. As I stated earlier, we have to rebuild a lot of our disciplines. But what we spent time looking at strategically was what has the most impact and the biggest impact on our kids' academic performance. And the biggest area that we have to tackle first, and unilaterally was discussed, reading was the area that we had to focus on. So for next year, the priority of the district is to rebuild our curriculum, not only build our curriculum, our development process, but the way we train our teachers, the way we implement it, all subject around the foundations of reading. What that means is we have to do things a little bit differently as well. The way we currently write curriculum is it's written over the summertime. And that's done, teachers work 186 days. We have curriculum writing sessions over the summer, teachers volunteer, we pay them a rate to write it over the summertime. What we've discovered is we don't always get everyone's input or skill and talent when we write it over the summer, because it's really based voluntarily who's willing to do it. We have the ability during those 186 days to ask teachers to do it if we provide coverage for them during the day to do that. What does that mean from a fiscal sense? Nothing. Because we have funding already set aside for curriculum writing, all we've done in our current budget, there's a line item for curriculum writing over the summer. What we've done in this budget was move that to our substitute line, because if the cost is the same, we can get a better bang for our buck to have our teachers write it while they're with us, as opposed to asking them to volunteer over the summer and paying them to do that. The other piece of this is what the board's going to adopt a calendar for next school year. Within our school calendar, some of your parents know this, we have built-in half PD days throughout the district. Those PD days, if we restructure them properly, we don't need a full day substitute, and we already have them for a half day, more cost effective, and we have everyone that can collaborate together instead of whoever decides to come over the summer. The theme is the work has to get done. We have to be creative in the way that we're doing it. I will get back to that in a second. This is our approved budget history. You guys have been pretty generous with us. I am by no means complaining. I wanted to make sure that I pointed this out, but when Pam and I started the budget process last summer, in July, Pam always asked me, where are you thinking? We pulled this up and I pointed the number and said, the highest number on there, I can't go any higher than that. 4.94, that's maybe I'll stretch it to 499, but that's where we gotta shoot for. It wasn't long for Pam to come back in my office with the look of fear in her face saying, okay, how much do you want to get rid of to even get close to that? Because we're at 11 as it started. So just for content's sake, as we're having budget meetings. That was our intention when we started this process, but back in July, there were things that we didn't know. History of teaching positions. We have 141.55 certified teachers in the district. We're not asking for any new. Now, that doesn't mean that the current staff that we have won't be doing things differently with the priorities that the board set forth in the strategic plan. But we didn't want to come in here and say, in order to achieve some of these goals in the first phase of the strategic plan, we need to add a level of staff. Our intent and our hope is to do it with existing staff and just reclassifying people into areas that are more aligned with the board's strategic plan. I've also gotten a lot of questions, not from this room, but just even having conversations with colleagues about what is the impact when your enrollment is declining. What does that mean for a district, particularly when it comes to retaining your staff? So staff retention is a big concern, particularly in this world's environment. There are some things to take into consideration when we do decrease staff. There is cost avoidance. To replace a teacher does cost us money when it comes to separation, recruitment, onboarding people, anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 every time we have to turn over a staff member. Those are figures that we have to build in when we're looking at possibly reducing staff. We want to protect the town's asset value. Frequent turnover can destabilize a culture and student outcomes. Maintain stable, high quality staff allows a district to build on current momentum rather than starting over year after year after year. Consistency for kids is key. So there's a value to that. It's hard to put a dollar amount on, or having the relationships that the existing staff have with our students. We want to create a competitive edge. That's what we talked about with competition. By being able to be creative and offer things that we haven't offered before, we can market ourselves as a premium educational destination that helps re-engage families and hopefully, it's not an exact science, but try to reverse some of those enrollment trends. And then what we've heard through the whether it be surveys or all the data we collected was trying to continue to build that community trust. And high retention rates and familiar faces do that. And it shows that the school's committed to its students and helps stabilize or even hopefully reduce declining enrollment by maintaining that reputation within the community. So that's really what's driven behind not just what we can offer, but trying to utilize the good people that we currently have. This is our per pupil expenditure. This frustrates me every year that I've been in public education, because the reality is people will ask, what does this mean? If I've gotten this question every year in my career, what does this budget mean for our per pupil expenditure? The reality is I don't really know for a number of reasons. One, this is always a year old. Two, we don't know who's going to be here and how much money we get in year after year after year. But more importantly, this is not our algorithm. This actually comes from the state of Connecticut. And many have tried to get a rational explanation of how they come up with their formula because they use an average daily membership. And I have traditionally asked, I know Pam has traditionally asked, to ask colleagues, no one could come for a direct. So not to, deflect the issue. The reality is I wouldn't want to tell you something that I couldn't promise. I don't know definitively. Now we could create our own numbers, total budget amount of kids we have, that's what it would be. But it wouldn't line up necessarily with what the state reports it as, because they have their own formula that they won't share. But in essence, that's kind of where we fall with our neighbors. Obviously, Westbrook is smaller than us, so their numbers are dividing by less, it's gonna be higher. We're lower than Region 4, but we're higher than Clinton, we're higher than Lime. That's last year's figures. Again, this information we get from the state, but we want to make sure we include it every year so that the community knows where we stand. Promise I'll try to be quick. Just to recap, sustained services was 6.21. The initial budget request was 11.32. My superintendent's budget, which was actually produced December 19th, I believe, because we typically will give it to the board before we leave for a holiday break, was 7.99. And that was with the understanding of what else can we reduce that doesn't have an impact on staff or programs. And at that point in time, that's where we were. When we returned, a lot of that 7.99 conversation was focused on the rising cost of our health insurance program. There was information in December that we did not know a week ago. We are in an insurance consortium. We'll get into it briefly in a second. I'll answer any questions you like, and if you're not interested, I'll stop, because sometimes people like to ask these questions. But the end result was, by the time the board was in a position to adopt the budget, we did get some promising news with insurance, not only for the current fiscal year, but for next year's renewal, that we're able to reduce the request from $7.99 to $7.57. At that point in time, the board had approached Pam and I and said, we do realize that's a high number. That's a lot to ask. We're not in a position, we still want to maintain what our goals and our plans are. Are there any other places that we can cut that won't have an impact on programs or staff? And to be honest, the answer at that point in time was no. Anything else would have an increase on staffing, and we couldn't promise that we can offer the things that we want to offer. So the conversation then led to, the board had just adopted a revision policy of the state legislation that allowed boards of ed to maintain up to 2% of a current year's fiscal to roll over into a reserve account, non-lapsing reserve account. So we met with a budget and fiscal committee, where we just presented this is an option if it's the will of the board. Budget and fiscal committee endorsed the idea. It was presented to the entire board, and a week ago tonight, I believe, the board opted to adopt the budget with the understanding of, yes, total cost is going to be 7.57 as we stand now, but the request of the Board of Finance can be reduced to 5.57 because the board has the ability, and you have this information in your packet as supplemental material, as to where we can identify the funds to keep that for. By setting up that non-lapsing reserve account, essentially the board can help pay some of that giant bill in order to reach the needs that they need. And the part of the conversation, the question was raised, like, do we need to ask the Board of Finance to do this? Technically, the legislature, and this was all on YouTube, so you can look it up. Technically, the board doesn't need to ask permission to do that. But my recommendation, and there's board members here, was I think you need to be transparent about it. Even though we don't need permission, I think we should be open and share that when we go in front of the Board of Finance, that this was the thinking behind it. The thinking behind it, I can't speak for the board, was a recognition that that's a lot of money to ask for, and a way to work with the Board of Finance to say, we're gonna try to assume some of this in the manners and the avenues that we're allowed to do it. So the end result was a request of 5.57 for next fiscal year. And I preface all of this with, we are still in February. There's a lot we don't know between now and the end of the year, now and July 1, when this budget approaches. But for where we are now with meeting the needs of where the board wants to go, planning wise, that's without impacting staff and programming, that was the budget number that was passed along to the Board of Finance. I'm gonna circle back quickly because I did get some questions on what would you use that 2% for? I'm sure I'll have questions on how we got it, but I'll keep that to the end. Very good question, and George, if you don't mind, George sent a question saying, I'm just curious about how, and I appreciate the question. If you set aside 2%, like, is that in perpetuity? You need that 2% every year. Typically, when you put something aside, it's for a one-time expense. What we're attempting to do is the curriculum piece that we have to do is to allocate the 2% to go towards that, to cover that. Because although that might be something that we have to continue to build on year after year, the reading is a one-year project. So we designate in the board's appropriation that 2% reserve, if it makes it through its entirety, that would be designated to address the curriculum aspect that we have to do regardless of what our funding mechanism is. So although it's not a one-time capital purchase, it is an isolated, or can be an isolated initiative. Obviously, we have to build on more, but I think the question that Pam and I struggle with is, we don't want to create an artificial fiscal cliff. So we want to designate that to something that if we don't have the funding to sustain that, it's not as if we have to just start laying a bunch of things off. So throughout all that, I know it says 3 dedicated staff members in each building, 1 in each building to facilitate this process. That is all done with existing staff. Repurposing existing staff members to do that, to focus in on that work. Those people haven't been identified yet, but we want to make sure that the Board of Finance understood that we weren't asking for 3 more people. The rest should be relatively quick. That's the pie. 64% is people, 15% is health insurance, is benefits. $28 of what we're asking for is in 4 buckets. Salaries, benefits, tuition, that includes magnet and special education and transportation. Some of them are non-negotiable, obviously salaries and benefits are, we don't have 10 amount of people, that number could be reflected, but there are other things we don't really have a lot of influence on. The albatross over everyone's neck, when I started this process in December, we were at 23%, but we were also at a position where we concluded last fiscal year as a consortium, our claims were higher than anticipated, that we were short from a cash flow perspective as a consortium. So we had to make some adjustments within our group of 9 boards, and there's 2 towns within our consortium. And then when that happened in July, when July happened, Pam and I sat down and said, what if we're in this position again next June? Are we prepared? Are there any funds that we currently have that we can hold? Because we can't go back to the town in June and say, we need $300,000 to pay our insurance bill, because we don't control what claims are. So that's where the root of how do we have the money in order to do this new process originated from. In addition to things happen throughout the year that we budget for, but we don't always control. Right now, the hope as a consortium is to get to 15% for renewal for next year. That is the hope. That is what our consultant is telling us should be the case. However, when we made the original 23%, the only claims we had were through November. We're self-insured, so we pay the claims as they come in. 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago, it looks like we are in a solvent fiscal situation for this current fiscal year, where the money we're holding to pay additionally, we will not need to do. Next year's renewal looks like it's not going to be 23%. The challenge that we have is they're shooting for 15%, but if we budget at 15% now and they're wrong after this meeting, we have to come back to you and say we got it wrong. So we are comfortable, and we're not the only ones who have reduced our plus 20% to 18, with the commitment that as soon as we get the okay, that we'll come back to 15, we'll tell you. That decision doesn't get made as a consortium formally for the bylaws until April, end of April, early May. But as we get more 12-month rolling claims data, we do the budget fiscal committee through the board, we're gonna do a monthly update on where we stand. The goal is to get to 15, it won't go lower than 15. When we get a clearer picture that 15 is actually attainable, the commitment is obviously not just through the board, but also with you, we will let you know. But right now, there's some concern that if we go beyond that 18 and some trend data doesn't come in the way we anticipate it, we can always deduct we can't have it. So that's sort of an asterisk of it, hopeful, but we will certainly be as transparent with that as we can. This is everything else of the 20% left over. Information's in your packet. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the water bill and the gas bill, but we're not immune to the consumer price index like everyone else. So if anyone else electric bill has gone down, let me know. But we're in the same boat as everyone else. But for the essence of time, I've already gone longer than I was anticipating. The capital operating budget. There's one project at Goodwin that's included in the 5.57%. We have some abatement that's still required to be done with one wing over at Goodwin, hasn't been done yet. And then we have at the middle school, the chimney over by the gym is in need of repair. We have to address that. Everything else that's on the capital operating budget, so it's about $400,000 total. It's built into the 5.57. Everything at Old Saybrook High School is reflective of phase 1 of the strategic plan. So those are the things that are referenced in the initial phase of the strategic plan. Those are included in the budget request. Obviously, if we're in a position to do some of these with existing funding, or maybe we don't do them all at once, that was all included for the sake of planning of aligning to the board's plan. Only year 1. That's what's referenced in the operating budget. This can be quick because we don't get much. Our federal grants have gone down, but that's not because of any cuts from Washington. That's reflective of enrollment. And I just got a notification from the state of Connecticut that they're the keeper of all of our grant funding, that they do not anticipate any federal grant funding statewide, that everything has been secured, at least for next fiscal year. This next phase is basically all gone. These are all the fallouts from the COVID related funding, that are now going to be extinct. And that's it. By now, I am sure you are all sick of my voice, so I will stop. I've been talking too fast. I don't know if I like talking, I'm certain to teach it, but I wanted to make sure that we left enough time for questions, and if I missed anything, I apologize. I will shut.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was an outstanding presentation. If I can just make one clarifying comment before I open up for questioning. So, obviously, I'm very interested in the student population. When you mentioned that Goodwin right now is 400 kids plus in the largest school, just to be clear, Goodwin essentially at this point represents 7 grades. 7. Yeah. Because kindergarten, 4 grades, and preschool, for 3 and 4. Yeah. It will not be 400 going to the middle school. It'll be 260. Yeah. With that, open up for questions.
I have a statement pretty much. Say good evening, Superintendent Dresnick, members of the Board of Education, members of the Board of Finance. The clerk, select person James Wizakowski, Ms. Wizakowski, and the first selectman Carl Fortune. I prepared a few remarks and I'll leave them for you to consider. My 3 children went through the entire school system and they exited well prepared for always thereafter. They're proud to report that they're from Old Saybrook and products of the public school. My wife, she's an amazing teacher who touches the lives of many and is also a proud part of the public education system, especially in Old Saybrook. Suffice it to say, Old Saybrook has some renown as an up-to-date, talented place where school and community interconnect in many ways. That's why I feel, as you mentioned on the slide, with 4.54 as the top number, blindsided, frustrated, and conflicted with the extraordinary budget request of nearly 8%. I poured over the entire budget, which is similar to those in the past 15 years. We never once lagged in per pupil expenditure that presently tops $28,000. In the last 4 years, the budget requests were more in line with what other area schools and budgets were at or near, which is around that 3% level. It's, that kind of a standard way, 3%, everyone seems to say that. Specifically on slide 34, you said 2.64, 4.9, 3.38, 3.5. Those were the budget requests raised in the last 4 years. We weren't underfunded last year nor any of the prior years as measured by the continual success of the school in and out of this community. There's no need for catching up. To make such a grand request is concerning. I've seen reports of other school district budget requests, none anywhere near 8% or as now modified to 7.5%. I want to be able to support the budget and advocate for its adoption. It's my belief that we can continue to provide the quality of educational experience we expect to merit, and we can do so within the confines of a more modest budget request. That's a statement.
Thank you, so.
Can I just jump in? Yeah, so I'm gonna just ask a bunch of questions, so that I'll ask questions and then we can pass it on. So the health insurance consortium, years ago, when I first came in, I think my first budget year was 12-13. We separated from the schools, we separated brokers. I felt a broker that was at least representing the town didn't know enough, to be honest with you, but the consortium, and this is an honest question, do we love the consortium? And has the consortium, I assume they have looked at the state plan, not that the state plan is any bargain, by the way. I know our unions always look at the state plan. It's more expensive for us. And we have an HSA plan. I think you have more of a PPO plan. No,
We're all ages.
yeah, okay. So I don't know, in terms of either looking at that and the state plan was, the claims exceeded the premiums this year. They keep saying it's getting better and better. It's not, but it's still there. And I didn't know, number one, if that is an option, not while you're in the consortium, because I know pulling out of a consortium is a big deal. So, but you're, I'm just wondering if there's any thought to exiting the consortium, because some of those increases aren't that good. Even though we look at state trend, I don't know if that's BOE trend, but I don't know state trend being 15%, but our broker gave a state trend of 9 to 10. And, you know, we're lower than that, but that experience matters, I get it. So I'm not here to point fingers, you had bad experience, it happens, but I'm just wondering where that trend data came from and if it's exclusive to teachers or Board of Ed, number one. So is there any thought about the consortium? Is that consortium growing, shrinking, holding firm, everybody all in? And maybe it's not something you can even talk about publicly.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the best I can. So the consortium is under the one for all, for one sort of,
Understood.
within their bylaws. And that can shift year from year, because we do get information based on individuals within it. So in some years, it's advantageous for us to be in it, because our experience is bad, and another district may be bad. There's a lot of conversations about, the performance of the consortium. It is looking traditionally at like what the state plan or what we would have been on our own. It has been advantageous for us to be in the consortium over it.
Okay.
This year, obviously, there's a lot of sticker shock within, not just within us, but also with those in the consortium. We get that state figure from our consultant. So, none of us have insurance degrees. But when we make those decisions as a group, we do take that into consideration, including, what it would be like for us. The concern with the state plan, at least the way it's been explained to us, is your premiums can change at different times. So like for us, when we're locked in.
I don't know enough.
That was enough. That was explained to us, like you could be told a 12, but all of a sudden it's a 15 if the consortium doesn't, it's kind of floating. So for stability standpoint.
I'm not recommending it.
Yeah, no, I'm just telling you what I don't know much about, other than our unions requested every time as well.
And, if you feel, I just wanna know that the consortium is being examined and whether the town Board of Ed should continue to be in it, and if that's the decision to stay in it because it's good for the BOE, do it, but I just wanna make sure it's being looked at. On page 17, I'm probably gonna go in reverse order here. The NEASC recommendations, you'd say we're way behind. Well, whose responsibility has that been? And why are we way behind? And why is, it seems sudden that we're way behind? And who is in charge of this? And why are we so far behind?
So I don't say way behind. So the NEASC visit was last fall, and you don't get the report until at some point last winter. So really after this budget process. And what they do is they make recommendations for your accreditation. And one of the things, like for instance, our curriculum documents, they exist, but they're all in a Google Drive. So the way the legislation is, curriculum has to be transparent for any member of the community or parent to go on and easily accessible for them to get it. If you don't know how to work a Google Drive, you can't find it. We didn't have the infrastructure. We do now. There's a program where we can write it, but also develop it. When we do a curriculum audit, we have to look at, did the scope and sequence meet with what the state standards are, as opposed to maybe what we've been teaching for a while as a lesson plan, not necessarily a curriculum. So they look at it granular from that perspective, lining up state standards, making sure that there's a continuum from beginning to end. So their recommendation, and it was in their report, was you need a curriculum revision. And curriculum is supposed to be revised on a cycle every couple of years, because laws change, requirements change, all those things. So it's not to say like nobody did it, that we didn't have any, but it's time for us to revise it. And that was brought to light through the process. At some point last.
And you ask this one, every
Yeah,
5 years?
come back they do a site visit, so it's a 10-year accreditation process, but they come back after 5. So they come back to a site visit, they'll return again in a couple of years, and they'll look at, okay, this is what we recommended. Did you adjust X, Y, or Z? I don't think it was a shock for anyone to say that we can use some work in revising our curriculum, but where do we start? Right? Because that's constantly evolving. And if you look at that state mandate list, a lot of that is embedded in there. We have a brand new reading program that nobody asked for. State said you have to have one. You got to pay $200,000 for it. But we have to make sure that K-12, all of our documents align to what the new standards are. So that's what we talk about. Not necessarily being behind, but having to reevaluate where we are and what we're building going forward.
So years ago, and Pam, you were here for this, I don't know who else was, but we, 5, 6 years ago, hired a math coach or a reading coach, one or the other, maybe even more than that.
We had a math coach,
Okay,
a very successful math coach, who worked with our teachers and also worked with, curriculum and development. At this point, that happens to be an open position that would be part of, consideration for,
The repurposing.
of, looking at, starting with ELA, with the reading.
okay. With regard to the 2% that you're using, I have a couple questions. You're gonna have to re-explain to me how that doesn't create a cliff. And it's not it is a one-time investment or it's not?
It can be. So the curriculum revision process is really a year-long endeavor, right? In a perfect world, we would transition from reading to others. So some other disciplines won't need the amount of resources because they're not pre-K through 12. So, the social studies curriculum may not be as embedded as like reading is district-wide. So, and by putting the emphasis on reading for next school year, building the infrastructure and the supports and resources to go in there to build and implement it can be done in a year. We're cognizant of that we don't have the resources to continue and build on that. If we have to sort of stop there and go back to the old way of writing curriculum, we can do that without essentially gutting it and creating that cliff. So if we want to continue on that path, then yeah, we're gonna have to find the 2% year after year to do it. If the 2% gets removed next fiscal year, we've identified what we're using it to spending on, and we just won't be in a position to build on that going further.
So we're trying to be intentional about what that 2% would be used for. And as intentional as we can be for one time, if it needed to be if the program needed to be sunset, that it didn't create something that would require layoffs. If we didn't have that money, if it was gone after the first year, that it wouldn't create a cliff, create a problem moving forward. And that was a discussion that went quite a bit between the two of us, because that's a very obvious concern. It was the same focus when we had COVID funds. And we very carefully and very appropriately use those funds for one-time expenses,
Yeah.
so that we wouldn't create a situation where we kept funding teachers who then all of a sudden we wouldn't be able to keep. So in that same mindset is how we're looking at.
Okay. Okay. Not fully understand, but that's my problem, not yours, I think. So you're using 2% in theory of this year's budget, of the 25-26 budget, that you anticipate you're able to have in your budget, 600,000. Do you anticipate there'll be additional surplus? It may be early for you to anticipate that you'll be able to put into the off-budget funds that we've created for the schools for capital projects like HVAC, or years ago, we talked about the turf track, maybe putting it back into that.
Right. At this point, after this week, we've had some unanticipated, unbudgeted, facilities expenses this year. We've had 2 crack boilers at the high school, and which we've mentioned previously. We've had, large trees that were in decline and a safety hazard, unexpected high ticket items. This week alone, I had valve repairs at Goodwin, so, things, it's too hard to say. I would love to get through heating
No, that's
season,
fine.
And I'm always on the more conservative side, that I don't.
Yeah, but you're confident you're gonna.
I'm
have-
confident
yes.
about
Okay,
because of ebb and flow of things that have changed since that budget was built.
and
Beyond that, I don't know.
so I feel like, I've been hearing a little bit about some of the boilers for years and no, the schools are old. I'm not saying they're not,
Mhm.
but, and I mentioned this to the superintendent a week or two ago. Are we looking at possible performance contracting and just having someone come in and looking, considering what they can do?
Yeah, actually,
And it's, by that, do you mean like,
I mean, getting a Honeywell in here, they examine the schools, they say, we're gonna replace 3 boilers. We're gonna do this additional, work that will, whether it's LED lighting, which I'm sure a lot of.
we're in the process of working with,
And the investment that they make is paid for over 20 years,
We're
with your
working-
bills level.
we've just initiated getting the background information for Eversource.
So what?
For Eversource to start a similar program at looking at our energy efficiency.
Okay.
Which includes our heating and our fuel utilization to look at that. And yes, if we're
I'm not telling you how to run the buildings, but
understood,
I hear I'm hearing boilers, okay? And in fairness, I just want to make sure if there's a way to make that investment. And
more
we've
affordable,
never done, I've never done it on the town side.
right?
I've had people ask me, have you considered? I'm just wondering if it's worth, these consultants come in, they'll do it for free.
Mhm.
They're selling a service, I get it, but if there's a way for us to pay for some investments over the course of 20 years, that makes sense. And they get the Eversource rebate, Chris, I'm sure you've done this.
Yeah.
Maybe you have.
Honeywell, I think.
Yeah, Honeywell does it, ESG, I get
Mhm.
assaulted at these conferences by these people who want to give me their cards, they're out there, so.
Of course,
I just want to make sure that it's being considered when you're talking about very large ticket expenses. So one other question, I know a new teacher, 3-year teacher contract.
Yeah.
Goes into effect July 1.
Yeah.
Of this year. What are the increases, and I'm sure it's in the book, I'm sorry.
it's actually not, because it was a little more granular than the information that we normally include. But I did have it prepared. So. Let me make sure I can read my own writing. It's a 3-year average of 4.4, 4.7, 4.81, and 3.68.
Wait, 3-year, you said 3-year, you just give me 4 numbers, excuse me?
3-year average of 4.4,
Oh, okay.
year 1, 4.71, 4.81, and 3.68.
On page 10, you talked about provide real world learning and partnerships, and I assume that's beyond Arena Using's wonderful program.
Yeah.
Because that seems like a great program, but maybe not enough.
Yeah, we're hoping to, I'm actually going on Monday to, a team of high school folks are gonna go up to a district up in East Windsor who does similar partnership stuff, so we can try to model some of that.
And I'm getting to the end here, so, you, on page 9, you talked about the percentages and numbers of kids, special ed, multilingual, is it similar, what is it, DIRG or DIRG or something? Yeah.
That they don't really use, that
They don't
we still
use
use.
Yeah, so, right, so. I mean, these numbers can't be unique to Old Cedar either. Not for this area, right? I mean, I assume if you were to flight it out along the shoreline, we'd probably see, I'm not saying you're going to Fairfield County or anything, but I assume it's similar.
It's, yeah, and we've done that, and at the board level, we actually can pull, it's all publicly available, there, you can go to Ed site, you can put in any town you want, you can see ours in there, so we actually do that as an exercise with the board to go through that design with others surrounding the
Here's a really dumb question, so get ready. Special ed kids, I have a couple of questions. When you identify special education, do some of these kids graduate out of special education as they go through the school system?
It depends, typically. A lot, depending upon, obviously it's a child with a disability, so the IEP plan is the resources and the accommodations to meet that child's needs under their disability. I use my own kid as an example. My kid had ADD, so she had an IEP and different, resources to do that. Graduated high school, graduated college,
Yeah.
yes, so she has it, but she's able. There are some students who go into the transition program, our special education population that stay with us until they're age 22.
Right.
So there's a differentiation,
Right.
so they graduate, but to graduate out of an IEP is not very common.
Okay, didn't know that. And I don't know if you saw the article, I forget where it was, but I read it this morning. At Stanford College, how like a vast majority of the kids identify as special needs to get single room dorm, to get out of the cafeteria plan so that they can get money, and special needs qualifies as anxiety, of course, ADHD, but it was absurd. And I'm just wondering if, I know you're not categorizing, making up these disabilities, but the article was basically saying how ridiculous it is and how kids are using these, not that they're doing it in, it's more of a comment than it is. It was all about Stanford and how they're gaming the system, by claiming they have a special
One of
need.
the things that we have seen, because there's two different, so if a student's, the numbers that you see are only kids who have IEPs. That means they have a legal binding document, they have a disability. There's also another avenue of 504s, right? So it's not a formal IEP, but you can have a 504. Typically, traditionally had been more for medical purposes. So again, I use myself as an example, not a kid. If I broke my knee or broke my leg in high school, I'd have a 504 because my accommodation would be, I got an elevator key or I would allow to be targeted in class because I couldn't get there on time. Traditionally, those are what had been. What we have seen post-COVID is a lot more 504s for things like anxiety and depression. The reason these numbers are increasing, they may not have been on the rolls as an IEP in the state's eyes coming out of COVID, but if you're putting interventions in place that are helping a kid with a 504, those will articulate themselves into an IEP because it's working, and that's why you're starting to see an increase in, because the 504s that we've seen in the last 5 years are not the traditional, broken ankle that we may have seen. We're seeing a lot of more social emotional things with kids with regarding anxiety, depression, things along those lines, and they're, becoming more formalized through an IEP process. So I don't envision those numbers, and we are, just so put your mind at ease, this is not something that's specific to Old Saybrook. This is, anytime you read anything in Hartford, it's about special education.
And just more of a comment, probably, the Old Saybrook school system, from what I understand, Scott would know, had 1,800, almost 2,000 students at one point. That's my understanding, like maybe 20 years ago, I don't know.
There's a lot.
And now, I know, it's been a while, but
Yeah.
1,600, probably not that long ago, right?
No.
And so I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think the point is also there's just less kids. That's statewide, as you said. And kids have been going to Xavier and Mercy since I was in high school. They've been doing that. So I hope you're successful in trying to keep some of these kids, but I'm not sure that that's new. And I'm not sure that it's something that you can necessarily stop if kids want to not go to Old Saybrook High School because they have this image at Xavier and Mercy or maybe a magnet school or better. And I'm just wondering if the percentages of kids who are leaving 8th grade to go somewhere else are similar to what they were 10 years ago. I don't know.
Probably not, because there are more options now than there were.
More options, yeah.
Magnet schools have had a drastic increase on that. It's a competition right now.
I mean, there's like 2 towns or 3 towns in the state that have gained a lot of population. Rocky Hill, I know, is, and Danbury are growing population centers. It just seems like Southeast Connecticut is not, but that's it. That's all I have. Thank you. Thanks for seeing, Carl. Anybody else?
Sure.
I have a few. So some of these are gonna be real basic because I'm new to the board. But just to start, can you give it a little history on the teacher's contract? And did you go through mediation or arbitration? Is this an arbitration? When you came up with these numbers, because the numbers seem high, the 471, 5481, 368, it sounds rich compared with most collective bargaining agreements in the state. So if you could just go through how you got there.
Sure. So it was negotiated through the subcommittee of the Board of Education. It was settled. It wasn't, didn't go to we actually didn't go to mediation. We were able to settle prior to mediation. We didn't go to arbitration. And at the time of settlement, it was at the state average for what the information that we had at the time during negotiation season. It was on or around the state average, like a 1/10 of a point higher at the time of the state average, but there was another settlement coming in that was gonna bring the state average down. So when we presented that information to the board and the board's negotiating committee, it was determined on both sides, because you obviously have to negotiate that with the union, that the settlement was, we're gonna gain anything by going through the arbitration process. There was more to risk based on our financial position and what the settlements were coming in.
And did a representative from the Board of Finance?
No, I spoke with Carl about this. So we followed the same process that we did 3 years ago. And again, I apologize if there was a miscommunication on our part. I even spoke with the people who were on the negotiation committee. In some communities, the Board of Finance sits on it, and other communities, they don't. What was shared with me was that no members of the Board of Finance participated in the last one, so this is the Board of Ed committee. That may or may not be true, if there was a miscommunication on that one, I apologize. I've had a conversation with Carl about it. But I spoke to those who were involved in the previous process, because being new to this, my first one here, I'm like, who needs to be in the room? When we got that information, we followed the same process that was done, that I was told that was done 3 years ago. If that is inaccurate, again, it was not intentional, was not supposed to be a slight. I apologize. I can assure you 3 years from now, you're gonna get a letter saying, would you like a representative on the committee? But that was the question that I had asked the first time that I got through the process.
I just thought that was a statewide policy, that the budget setting entity
They
participates.
have the ability, but it ultimately comes to you for the denying or approval. Yes. Some communities choose to have a representative sit in on the committee. Others, the information that was shared with me is, as far as the negotiating team, it's the board's negotiating team. You can have the fiscal agent from the fiscal agent of the community sit in on it. Some people choose to not operate that way, and I was under the, I guess, incorrect assumption that wasn't necessarily how it was done there. So again, if there was a miscommunication, I apologize. That was certainly not intentional. We were just trying to follow what we were told was done in years time.
If I could, just on year one, the 4.71, can I compare that to on the details under salaries of certified staff? That it's a small difference, but there's probably an explanation for it between the 4.71 and then it says the teachers will be in the first year of a contract with an average 4.89% increase. Is that, are we looking at apples and apples or apples and oranges there?
That's in the narrative in the book.
Yeah.
No, that was
Here's what he said.
great. I can double check that number and get back to you. I pulled it quickly off of a question from an email. And I was trying to pull quickly from spreadsheets I had from negotiations. So I can double check whether my note currently or the note that I updated in the book is incorrect.
Thanks. Next question, it says the total certified staff account represents a net increase of 5.52%. So that would obviously include more than just the first year of the teacher's contract.
Right.
What else is in there?
Okay, so certified staff includes both administrators as well as teachers. But also each year we have teachers who have the opportunity to have a salary increase related to a degree change. So as part of our budgeting process is we estimate roughly about 10% of our teachers are eligible to either move from a bachelor's to a master's or a master's to a 6th-year advanced degree. Because they don't need to tell us that until March 1st. So we don't want to be behind
Mhm.
by not estimating a certain number, an average number. Sometimes we might have more than that, sometimes we might have less than that, but we kind of go, instead of just like 10 teachers, it's now a percentage of the staff. We put an estimate, and sometimes that degree change could be a $3,000 bump. And sometimes, depending on where they fall on experience, it could be a $9,000 bump. So we just want to be as fiscally responsible as we can. So that adds to that line item is the anticipation of some degree changes.
Is that based on history? That, I mean, you didn't pull it out of the air. You must have based that on.
Yeah.
You've seen the past
Yeah,
year.
on history, and I try and gauge it by, teachers who have been, putting in for tuition reimbursement, who, tell us that they're going through coursework. Not everybody does, so it's kind of a hit or miss, like, you can look at somebody, state of Connecticut requires, that after 10 years you have your master's. So I can see people who are getting close to that, perhaps on their bachelor's, and so I can kind of be like, well, this should be happening soon. So past history for sure.
How did you, reflect possible retirements in the budget?
We didn't because they don't, we don't have a date where they're required to let us know if they're gonna retire. So it would be challenging to make an assumption unless we had some kind of a heads up. It will probably be in the next, probably in the next few months, we'll start hearing some things. But honestly, teachers could wait until the end of July to tell us that they're gonna retire. We did have a teacher retire mid-year that is not reflected in this number because we didn't know until this, end of December, and we had already built the budget in anticipation that teacher would be continuing. So that's part of where ebb and flow comes from and why, at the end of any particular fiscal year, there can be differences with total expenditures.
Based on
one unofficial right now.
unofficial, based on past years, what, over the last 5 years, how many?
There's no trends. There's no trend that I can say. Last year, we had 4 or 5 teachers. Year before, we had 1. There's no consistent trend with being able to, I can anticipate a degree change easier than I can anticipate retirements.
Okay, all right. Then there's 144 in the certified,
Mhm.
okay. Well, the odds are that somebody's gonna retire, but you just don't know what.
Right, and you don't know, you also don't know, if you're looking at potential savings. If you consider perhaps an elementary school teacher, that might be a little easier to fill. But if it's our high school physics teacher, the likelihood of there being a savings, in salary to find someone qualified to teach that, it is less likely for a specialized subject area.
How about on non-certified staff? Is there? How many non-certified staff is in?
We have a total of about 267 staff, so if you pull out the certified staff, including administrators of about 150, the remaining, run the range from custodians to secretaries to para-educators. In any of those groups, there isn't a significant savings in and out. There isn't a wide range in the salary from top to bottom.
Yeah.
So in general, we wouldn't ever estimate savings as a result of a retirement for non-certified staff.
Okay,
The salary differential isn't enough.
how many vacancies do you typically have among non-certified staff?
Right now, none.
Really? Okay, so no, naming the paraprofessionals, there's like 0.
At this moment, I believe we are full up. Yeah.
Okay, so therefore, there's no vacancy. Combination. Okay. Could you just, lastly, could you just go through, again, I wasn't on the board, but could you go through last year, I understand that the board, reduced your budget by, I don't know, so $200,000 or $300,000. Can you go through what the board did in order to reflect that reduction? I mean, well, how did you change your budget after the board said, no, the number is gonna be somewhat less?
A lot of it, came from capital. Because, in order for us to put in the administrative staffing that was needed, so we needed to keep that in salary. And so we reduced our capital budget to about $80,000 to be able to make that happen. We were able to, get some projects done at the end of the year. And then we just put off other things until this budget. So this budget, has money put back into the capital plan.
So was the original budget like 300,000 or 400,000 and then it got reduced to 80? The
Pretty
original
close.
capital budget.
Yeah.
And then the capital budget this year, well, you just went through it on your slide.
Is about 400.
And how many of those were projects that were pulled out after?
Well, the one part that we left was a portion of the asbestos cost. And so the remainder of that project is budgeted for this year. And there are no other projects, because we did not know that we had the issue with the chimney, so that was new. And then the strategic plan items are new. But you can see in that document, I gave past years about projects that were done in the past probably 2 or 3 years, so you could get an idea of the types of projects that normally happen. And then there are also lists of items projected out, beyond fiscal year 27 for fiscal year 28, of parking lots that will need to come up. So you can see a broad spectrum of the past and what we anticipate as best as we know until something else breaks, for the future plan for where we see the capital going.
Thank you very much.
Transportation. How many years is that contract with the bus company?
5 years, next year will be year 3.
And you see a potential, I mean, obviously can't do it now, but I think I've asked this every year, but so many people guilty, just so you know, drop their kids off at school and do not use buses, and the buses seem empty. And people wait in line to drop their kids off.
Yes, I do.
Can that be consolidated at some point? No, after with the new contract?
No,
Why?
It's a law. You have to provide if they're within your boundaries for riding, you legally have to provide a seat for every kid.
whether
Whether
they
they
write
take
it
it
or
or
not.
And if somebody opts out, like you can do an opt out where the parent will sign off and say, I'm not gonna use the bus for my kid, like consolidate a bus. And they only have to give you 48 hours to say, I want my seat back. So if you cut a bus because parents opt out and then they change their mind and say, I think it was 48 hours by the time we checked it. It may have changed in 3 years. You have to legally provide transportation.
And at the same time, we still have to cover the same amount of miles. Even if it might not stop as often, it's still gotta get out, out into Otter Cove and back again. So even if there were fewer stops in a particular route, if it doesn't reduce the number of miles the bus still has to travel, it unfortunately doesn't gain us an awful lot.
And then what does it cost, what does it actually cost the district when someone goes to Grasso Tech, Vinyl Tech, or one of the magnet schools? Obviously, the private schools are completely different, but what is that cost
So.
approximately? And if you don't have it,
No,
I can get it later.
So different rules for different schools, believe it or not, depending on when the legislation is written. Magnet schools, we pay tuition, we're not required to pay transportation, and we do not. VOAG school, we pay tuition, and we have to pay transportation for our agricultural schools. And we can designate an agricultural school, so our designated agricultural school is Middletown High. Our technical schools, we do not pay tuition, but we do pay transportation. Our designated high school is up in Vinyl in Middletown. And if students attend another technical school, we can provide transportation, or if there isn't a transportation available, we can reimburse families up to $6,000 a year. So, we have an agreement with I'm Lime that, students going to Grasso can ride that bus. There's no opportunity for, Grasso, Norwich Tech. So we reimburse parents mileage. When we had students going to VOAG in New Haven, we reimburse parents train tickets. So up to that $6,000 mark if it were. So that's how it breaks out. What we have to pay for those alternative options. And then if there are special education services, they bill us directly for those services.
With declining enrollment is not, isolated, obviously shoreline statewide. Through the budget process, and this is probably longer term, what are conversations around, consolidation and regionalization?
I'm gonna ban us.
Yeah, I've heard some chatter with
I
West.
get all of this good stuff like that. So. There's two different schools of thought on there. There's regionalization where you combine districts, right? You become like Region 4, two towns get together. There's been a willingness on both sides to want to do, or all three, however many towns you want to talk to, there has to be a want to do that or a need to do that. From my understanding, there has been conversations that predate me about possibly merging with a neighbor, but the neighbor wasn't necessarily a willing partner. In the other conversations I've had, I don't think the sentiment in one of those neighboring communities has changed as far as wanting to partner that way. So that leaves us with, we can't regionalize or partner with other districts and merge and marry. We should be able to at least regionalize some of the things we offer. So, that wheel that we showed you with the plan for what's happening in Oakland, that's going to take time. We're small. It's gonna be expensive. We can't do that. Maybe we don't have to do it all ourselves. Maybe there's another district that's very close to us that has a very robust tech ed program within their public school, not a tech school. So if we have students in Old Saybrook who want to go into a trade, but not to a trade school, if I were to send them there and in return take in one of their students here, then maybe we can partner better. The original conversation that I've been having with one neighbor. About a month ago, 5 of us got together, 5 small shoreline communities, semi-shoreline. That the conversations hadn't taken place about what other districts may have that we weren't even aware of. So we have another district that's in our region that has a very robust, safety program for people who want to become a first responder, fire, police. I was unaware of that. The new superintendent, they were unaware of it. So we are engaging in monthly conversations to say, we've already made a commitment. We don't have enough time to implement any of this for the next school year. Because it's going to take some time to build and plan. Even logistically, in order to share, things with each other, we all have to be on the same schedule, right? Like our high school schedule is different than Westbrook or more. But there is a commitment on the 5 of us that were in this group to say, everybody pick your specialty area. And instead of all of us trying to replicate and build the same thing, what if we were to build something here that we can trade with you? Those conversations are happening. That's why with regards to phase 1 of the strategic plan, the emphasis is on the School of Business. Because 25% of our current graduating class has indicated they're going to study business when they get out of here. And 2, it's not offered anywhere else. So I have something to trade with those other 4 communities and say, send me your business kids, I can send you your welding kids or something along those lines. So I think it's a legitimate question. We don't necessarily have the ability to just say we're going to merge with someone because it has to be a willingness partner. But I think the realization from the superintendent level is whether we regionalize or not, we're going to have to in order to survive. And those conversations are happening. It just doesn't happen as quickly as we don't like. Like if we don't have to build everything ourselves, we can still offer those things for our kids and not have to build it all internally. That's probably best case scenario. We're just not there yet. And by the way, that's true not only with education, it's true at our level too. And I think it's
for 169 communities. There's 169 mayors and first selectmen. There should be one for 3 towns in our area. I mean, you know, so it's true everywhere, and I've had conversations with the chief of police recently about, you know, what are other towns doing that we can share services? So we're all looking at that.
Yeah, and that's not unique to us either. I've done that in my, for years about, you know, we have smaller districts who can't afford to build a particular program, and I already had it. You send your kids to us, and instead of charging them, in some cases we do, I'd rather trade. So that way I have opportunities for our kids that we ordinarily couldn't offer. The conversation, and to be transparent, was we better do this before it's too late. Because we can't sustain this as small districts. And that's happening statewide. I can only speak for the conversation that I'm having, you know, within our region. But that is definitely something that's on their horizon. What it, you know, articulate to, I don't know definitively yet, but there is a willingness for us to expand upon that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation and for the work you put behind it. I like that you have a strategic plan that aims to prevent continuing decrease in enrollment. And it seems to be focused on the high school. Now I understand we have competitors, if you will. Do most of and I don't know, I'm new to this, so do most kids that come into our school system, I'm assuming most of them would come in probably in kindergarten, pre-K, you know, they move here and then a lot of families stay put and all the way through graduation. With declining enrollment, and I realize a lot of this is outside of any of our, we can't control birth rates, right? We can't control the state of the world where people are having fewer children. But there are some things we can control. When people are looking to where to move, there's several factors. Old Saybrook's expensive to move to. We all know, anywhere on the shore, pretty expensive to move to. Old Saybrook is more than some, less than others. But one of the things that families look at, of course, are the schools. And I'm a parent, so I hear from a lot of parents, and admittedly, I'm not the primary, you know, my wife would know a lot more, but I hear from her. A lot of people are concerned, you know, the elementary school rating went down somewhere, apparently. I think it was grade schools, and somewhere else, I think somebody else told me it actually went up. But in looking at my first question, I guess, is how come we're not focusing on the elementary school? If we're just, yeah, I think it's great what we're doing at the high school, and I love that. And it certainly makes sense to me, but, you know, for somebody moving to town, that's 8-10 years off. And I'm just wondering why we're not focusing more on the elementary school. The other, well, I'll stop there because you've probably already, and then I have more questions.
Sure,
but I'll let you-
yeah, so we are, but some of the structural changes at the elementary school actually already happened. They happened prior to this academic year. One of the things we talked about, you know, the curriculum emphasis, you know, we had a state mandate that we had to implement a new reading program. Nobody wanted it, but we had to do it. When you do that, there are requirements within the reading program that you're required to do when it comes to instructional minutes, the time you're supposed to teach literacy. But the way that we were currently structured, it wasn't anyone's fault, we did anything wrong, it's just this new thing came in and will we adapt in order to do it? So we had to look at changing the way that building was spent, right? So, you know, if we had X amount of blocks for, you know, reading, math, because we're not on schedules like at the high school, recess, you had the people in coverage and adult supervision, it wasn't matching the amount of time we needed to do certain things. So the team over at Goodwin basically spent the vast majority of the spring and the summer recreating the schedule there to meet the needs of where we have to go academically at that building. So a lot of the heavy lift from the structural change that we're hearing about in the high school, there's 2 reasons for that, the emphasis in the high school is one is people need to see the end game so you can plan for underneath. Like we know where our end game, where our kids are going, that helps us to strategically plan for the grades below that. But structurally, a lot of those changes at Goodwin were already taking place. You know, typically years past, we would offer Spanish as a special at Goodwin. But it was done every day for 15 minutes with one teacher. So that teacher went to every classroom on a cart every single day for 15 minutes. In reality, it wasn't, and the teacher's awesome, like she's amazing, yeah, still with us. And I talked to her, I'm like, is this better, but what if Spanish was a built-in special like art, music and PE and we can build a schedule around it? So kids, instead of getting it every day, you're getting 45 minutes consistently once or twice a week. We weren't built that way because we were going every single day for 15 minutes. And in reality, by the time she got into class, got everybody settled, it was like 7 minutes. No one's fault, you're dealing with younger kids. So looking at the schedule to make sure that we were meeting the required instructional time for what the new reality was with not only reading, but obviously that's coming down in math. Those things have already taken place now in real time. Now is the time that the changes were made, we're using this year to tweak what's working, what's not, and gather feedback. So there was really an increased effort. It just planning wise, there is a big section on the Goodwin is the foundation. If we build a foundation for our kids, by the time they get to the middle school, we're not, our fifth grade teachers are not having to spend as much time with remediation because we're all aligning what we're doing and talking to each other at all three of our buildings. So the emphasis on the high school is the end product, because again, like I said, the board's first question was, where are we seeing the kids leave and can we address?
So strategically then, is that like basically good when we're sitting tight for another 5 years? We're not.
No. Within the large document we gave you in the plan.
Yeah, I've read the whole thing. I've
Equal representation for all,
hours and hours. Yeah.
for equal representation for all levels, but sort of reshifting the focus on. Goodwin really is the foundation, and if we have the opportunity to expose kids to some other things to pique their interest, so when they get to the middle school, they can try something new. That's really what the end goal would be. But right now, the important piece is the structure and foundation of their academic performance is happening in that building. But we need to reinforce that at a younger, early intervention is the way to catch it. So there has been an increased priority in doing that, even outside of what we've seen this far in the budget report.
Has there been any consideration, like Madison or Old Lyme, to having a gifted and talented program at the elementary school? Just because that's, like a sales tool. We have a gifted and talented program. Why go to Madison? We have that here. Why go to Old Lyme? We have that here.
We don't currently have a formal program, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, I know we don't now. I just didn't know if it had been considered or if it
Yes,
could be.
one of the things that you noticed in some of the new course selections, not just at the high school, but at the middle school, are to address that. So we have an advanced science course. Matter of fact, that picture is advanced science in 8th grade right now. We have releases, so we're allowed to show those bits. That is actually our advanced science class at the middle school right now. As far as a formalized gifted and talented program, that's gonna take some time to build because there are some special certifications and depending upon how we do it. But we wanted to increase the opportunities for those kids who may qualify for that to take those courses while they're there. We have kids in the middle school right now that are taking high school level math classes. We're offering geometry at grade 8 right now inside the middle school. So we do a lot of great things. Question was, what are the kids really interested in? And it's not to say that what we don't do isn't good, but we're asking them, is it lining up with what your expectations are? We're preparing kids for a world that we don't know exists yet. They know better than we do about where their interest level and where they are at. But as far as a formal gifted program, that has come to my attention more than once. Particularly by some folks behind me, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's just, if I'm a scientist at Pfizer or I'm a professor at Yale or, and where am I gonna live? That's one of the things I'm gonna look at. And we also have competition at the elementary school level. I just happen to know this because my kids are that age. Where, a lot of kids that live in Saybrook aren't coming to school here and it's, they can afford to, great for them. But I think it'd be better for all of us if those kids were at our school. The rising tide lifts all boats, and having a gifted and talented program really, tells the community, we care, we're gonna educate your kids, we're gonna offer the best education we can. I'm glad to see you've got this flexibility that you're planning on moving teachers around. I agree, we don't wanna lay off teachers if we don't have to. We don't have too many, but we don't wanna lay them off. If we can shift them around, so maybe we can have somebody that's a half-time gifted and talented person, or, you know, somebody that can work with advanced readers or something like that. I think that'd be fantastic. Which brings me to the next thing, the $600,000, just going back through your old meetings, I was trying to figure out, it seems like you shortly after your budget passed, school year started or fiscal year started, you found out about this pending health insurance disaster increase. And so you had to freeze funds, or you chose to freeze funds at that point. So that was really from the beginning of the year, about 600 to 614,000 or whatever it is that you detailed in there. What was lost from that, if anything? And if not, like I did see, you know, there was several $100,000 with like it was 70,000 per school, I think, for building stuff, but were there programs that were cut as a result of that?
There was a position that was posted that we pulled back. So
Teaching,
there's a teaching, so actually referenced earlier, the coaching position that we were gonna start the reading process. It was a math coach. That person had moved in within the district, is now working actually at Goodwin as administrator. There was a vacancy. We were gonna repurpose that position with an emphasis on on reading, but we were actually defined it as humanities, so it was a little bit more broad so they can cover more areas. At around that time, when we started getting this information, we actually paused the posting and didn't fill the job. So that's one particular, I can say that we were planning on it, it was intended. We held off and asked some staff members if they can do a little bit more with some of those departments until we had a better picture on, are we gonna need cash to cover these bills? So that's just one, I don't know if Pam has the list.
we got a new administrator, lost a teacher,
Yes, well,
or shifted that very thing.
held
Held it.
it.
Okay, wasn't, the teacher wasn't.
No,
hired
it was
yet,
intended on
Right,
hiring
okay.
that teacher,
But
the
it's
time
gonna
the
be hired
administrator
as
was
a
hired,
administrator.
because
We
it
were
didn't
gonna
happen
hire
until
two,
after
and
July
then-
1. By the time of the posting, it was an internal person who got it, so once that person was appointed by the board, we then had to post to replace it, we reclassified it from, it was more directed just at math. We were just expanding the scope of that coaching role to humanities, because we knew we were gonna put an emphasis down the road with reading. But around that time is when we got the information that, hey, there might be some, trouble with insurance. We're gonna pause it for now, and we actually asked that individual person as actually still overseeing that department as a favor to us because we held that.
For the insurance with, and I know you wouldn't know details, right? Illegal for you to know the details, but were there one or two claims that really bumped everything up, or was it just a general melting up of,
How many, I mean,
for instance, because if it was one or two
Yeah.
people and, you know, maybe that problem would, not problem, I don't
Yeah,
know, call
it-
person problem, but
So
maybe.
again, it's the consortium, right? It's the collaborative, so it's not just our particular claim that went up, it's went up as a group.
Okay,
So we have stop loss.
yeah, I'm familiar with how it
Okay.
all works, that's why I'm
So
asking.
our large claimants.
If there were like two people that had serious issues, that could throw the whole
We
thing.
typically have 28
mhm.
large claimants that hit our stop loss number.
Okay,
We're at 50.
wow, okay, alright.
It's the large claimants that drove
Yeah.
the increase.
Was there a change in coverage to, like, did you add GLP-1 drug coverage or something? I asked, cause that's a real issue.
No, it was,
No, there wasn't a plan change,
Okay, what was
it,
covered before was,
Right.
okay,
and I mean, overall, regardless of the type of drug. Drug costs are more expensive,
yeah,
and there are more drugs, that are for treating chronically as
Right.
opposed to acute.
right,
So something that would have been perhaps a year is now a lifetime.
yeah,
So we're seeing a lot of it driven by that, without specifics, but we see a lot of that, and then you just have those high claims that just sometimes happen, and with anything else, it's cyclical. And so we're hoping that, it's not a trend
the
that
cycle,
keeps.
the end.
I don't know.
So
It
the,
was driven by large.
so and again, I wasn't on the board prior to this year, but so the 600,000, it sounds like aside from money for one position, that money that it really was wanted, but wasn't totally necessary. I mean, it got cut right at the beginning of the year, that's the only reason I say that.
I think it got helped.
It got held.
Well, no, hell, you
Yeah.
stopped spending it and it's still there. 'Cause we haven't spent it, right?
I kind of call it ebb and flow. So for instance, I mentioned earlier tuition reimbursement. We're required by the teacher's contract to have $20,000 for tuition reimbursement. I have to put that in the budget. It may or may not be used. In this case, for the lines that are on here are, we have a really good idea. We ask at the beginning of the year, who's anticipating. So, all right, this is now real money. I had to set it aside. But now as the year's gone by, I feel fairly confident that I can hold that aside for this. Some years legal costs are more than others. If we went into mediation for the teacher's contract, there would be a much higher legal cost. We know that's settled, so looking at what our actuals are at this point, we can feel that, you know, confidently. So as you're looking at each of the lines that are on here, a lot of it is for that reason. Some of these that you see and you're like, okay, well, does this happen every year? We were able to relook at our wireless contract for cell phones and hotspots, carried over from COVID, and we were able to do a lot of cleanup on that. There's savings this year, but when we built the budget for fiscal year 27, we tried to adjust for that because we knew it at the appropriate time to build it in. So some of these were, as we learned things this year, it was incorporated into next year, but we can set it aside. Because we know it's a known change, it's a known cost. We had to estimate electricity at Goodwin now that we're on the grid for air conditioning. You know, how did it shake out? So a lot of times when you're looking at what might be at the end of the year, is a result of a lot of these little pieces changing throughout the year, either up or down. And although the dollar amounts can seem large of, you know, what's left out of a $30 million budget, if it comes down to 2%, 98% accuracy isn't necessarily that bad, although we're always so very conscious about where we fall with that and to do the best with whatever goes up or down. And at the end, which is why I'm always conservative when Carl asks me, I'm like, I don't know, I'm afraid to say this, and then something's gonna happen. You know, and if you say it and somebody's like, oh, we can count on it. And then you never know what's around the corner. It could be a special education placement that moves into district. And, you know, so these items that are on the list are holds, but also as we work through the year, actuals compared to estimates, we have a better idea of where they are. So this list, I'm very confident that we would be able to accomplish this based off the changes that have happened throughout the year.
In the reading reconfiguration, I don't know what you call it, that's the whole, like the ARC, you look at replacing that or?
No, we just got it, and I know there's been
Let's
some
do.
concern, but we're really only in the second year of implementation. And we've, obviously, there's a huge financial commitment to that, so we don't know, somebody asks us, well, how do you know if it's working? We haven't really implemented it yet, and we had to make some adjustments, particularly at Goodwin, to make sure we were lining up, giving our teachers the time and the space they needed to implement it with fidelity before we're actually gonna see whether or not it's working to the level that we anticipated that it would. But again, the foundation, when we're looking at having to update a lot of the things that we're doing, which is natural, it's cyclical, we're supposed to do it every couple of years. Before we just go rewrite everything, let's focus on one particular area and do it well and what has the most impact. And that wasn't me saying, that was me going out to staff and saying, what should our top priority be in order to redo? And you know, reading, for lack of a better term, kept coming to the forefront. And because it is so fresh that we have this new art program and there was a lot of anxiety around that, not just with parents and kids, but staff. It was not fun for them and they're sort of just getting into their comfort zone with understanding how their world has changed in order to implement that, but we had to provide them a space to do it. And that's a lot of the changes that I referenced earlier at Goodwin, we had to make adjustments for.
And you have all the resources you need for the reading program, that's either paid for or budgeted, it's all included.
There are, as going back to earlier, but there are things that we call them timed purchases, like we have money, we're gonna buy them, but we don't have to buy them till the spring, till we know we're in the clear, we will do that, so.
Well, I'll ask you, I'll give you what's going on in my house, so. You know, we got these books, these little books to read, they're green, then you go to the red ones. Then we're back to the green ones, which seems. It's like if I had my 7th grade math book and I'm done with that, so there, take the 6th grade one. It's not really helpful, and I just didn't know if that was because we didn't have the money for it, or maybe that's the program.
We purchased all of the
Maybe that's all
program.
there is, I
Yeah,
don't know if there's
we-
another
the
color.
program was purchased in its entirety, the support of it is continuing training and professional development and for staff and things, but the purchases. That was selected for that purpose and it was.
They should have what they need.
They should have all
Yeah, I
that.
just.
Yeah, in this case, it's not, if your question is, you know.
Do we need more money to pay for?
We didn't withhold books
Right.
of grade three. That's,
Right.
that was already bought.
We will have to buy a new set for an additional, elementary class level next year, but I mean, that's the usual and customary that you have to do as you come and go, and then there are consumables, but, they have what they need to have.
Right, I'm just about done. And I say all this because like by my, you know, my silly math, not the state math, but dividing our budget by the number of students. It's at almost $31,000 this year. Next year, the ask anyway, almost $34,000. And just from a taxpayer perspective, people are probably looking at this, you know. I'm very supportive of the education budget, but. You know, that number keeps going up, and that's where there's a lot of pressure, you know, and we've also got other town increased costs, so to try to balance that's gonna be tricky. That's why I'm asking these questions, not because I'm trying to give you a hard time, I think I'm doing a great job, it's just, it is money to spend and people wanna know. My last question would be, the ECP program has, I think it was 85, is that the total between 3 and 4? Okay, and are we anticipating that 3 is gonna be open for everybody, or is that still a lottery?
It depends on how many 4-year-olds.
Yes.
The reason I ask is, so 85, roughly half and half, maybe fewer 3, more 4, but do all those kids go into kindergarten? Pretty much, maybe 1 or 2 go to a private school or,
Traditionally.
okay,
Fast.
cause I'm just thinking that would be a good way for us to. Get more students and families is, hey, we offer 3 and 4-year-old.
It's
I
a
don't disagree, I don't know where we would put them.
Oh,
We are
Wow.
capped space wise at equivalent rate.
Just thought it might be something if we're trying to get people. there.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of, we could move it, not that there is another room, if there's another room in another wing. Let's just say the size of certain facilities are smaller
Right.
in that wing. So that would require some
Right.
infrastructure
You're
changes.
not
too.
moving 4th graders into the toilets that high up there.
We are at capacity space wise.
Yeah.
All right, that was all my questions. Thank you very much.
Alright, so, I appreciate the time. I have about 3 pages of questions. And so a lot of these are questions and comments, and so I will go through this fast because but let me preamble this way. It won't be questions. A lot of these are going to be statements because some of these are very involved questions. Maybe we can come back later. But I will preamble this with, the reason why you're getting a lot of questions right now. These are all fantastic questions, is because we all support education, but these are huge numbers in a declining enrollment. And so we are not trying to do your job. We can't. We're trying to do our job and we're trying to see what these can be. And so I'm just going to touch on some of these. Some of these are going to be questions. And some of these questions I have told you before, and I've CC'd my colleagues here all the questions I've asked, but none of these should be surprised that a key question is going to be, you guys have just embarked on a 5-year strategic plan. The question is, how much is it going to cost? And I think the question was always been, it's tough to tell. I will reference specific pages in the beginning. Then we have 2 pages, a letter to me, pages 3 and 4. Your letter starts on page 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I will reference through that. Ideally, Ideally, if you just go through your book, then you can basically see where I'm at. The question has always been, what is the cost of this 5-year strategic plan? Because we need to anticipate what's going to come down the line. On page 2 of Karen's letter, she basically says the strategic plan, it's going to be each phase, second sentence of that, towards the end of that paragraph, each phase guided by specific actionable steps. And so understand there is no value associated with that. But just now, when Steve asked your question of can we regionalize, and you basically pointed to the wheel, and I think if I can quote you, it says that wheel will be expensive. That's what you said. What is that number? Because we've got to basically pay for that in the next 5 years. It's a comment at this point. If you guys provide that, that'll be helpful. I appreciate what you're doing with this plan. We need to change the curriculum, new programs coming up this fall. They look very exciting. We need to attract 8th graders. You keep saying that there'll be no teachers added. I need to understand how that's going to work. We have a teacher who teaches a particular course right now. That teacher is going to pivot and teach business management, or you're going to basically lay off that teacher and hire someone new. At the end of the day, same number. But understand, you're still going to get the same number. The teacher count has been a question come up. Jeff has asked a question, and I actually got a note from Susan, who's not here, but I have a list of questions from her as well. She has the same question about teachers. Your teacher count right now is 141 point something. I understand how this works. Last year, the 141, this year's 141. So you guys held back a teacher because one person became an associate principal. That, unless you counted that person still the teacher, you added 1 to 141 because that should be 140, just by my numbers. 2% solution. I'm with Carl. I don't get that. You're getting a lot of questions here. You want to pay that for a curriculum writing and so on. Next year, you guys come back and it says, we still need this. And we're going to say, no, go back to chiseling and stone. Have to do. You're going to say, we're going to need 2% to pay for a new playground. I get that. We don't need a new playground every year. But this, I don't understand that. Talk about a reading program costing, quote, $200,000. A few years ago, when I was on the board, we had a new program. We kept pushing it off because our reading was doing great. I don't understand what those were just now. But Mark asked you a question about the new program. Mark, I think your quote was, we were on year 2 of that program. That was more of a block than your cost. We're on year 2 of that. That was several $100,000. And we're asking, again, I need to understand this. We're asking for another $200,000 for this. I'm just going to keep going because this is going to go on, right? So maybe not questions for right now. Health insurance. I'm with Carl, right? We started 23, we're 18. Standing back, my daughter's a physician, so I get this. 18% will bankrupt this country. We can't do this. I don't know how to help you. We've got to do something. As a town, we can't do this, right? We will die, literally. You will not know what the final number is until late April, May. Every 1% of your healthcare cost is $30,000, right? 3% will give you almost 100,000 there. I'll be honest. Your current healthcare cost is $3 million. You guys are larger than probably all the departments in this town minus one. That one line item is huge on every single town budget. You're larger than almost everybody else. The teacher contract, if I can address you to, this is now your letter, this will be page 5, under payroll and benefits. This is the reason why I'm confused. In the payroll and benefits, page 5, about 3 lines down, fiscal year 27 will include the first year of teachers' collective bargaining agreement at an average of 5.33 increase in current certified staff. I didn't hear 5.33 tonight. I heard 4.4. Spread over 4.71, 4.81, 3.68. Some over 3 years is 12. Unfortunately, that's not how it works because these things are cumulative. Your cumulative percentages is gonna hurt. This is a little bit front loaded. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I don't quite understand that. If you look at the detailed page, which is what Jeff was asking about, on that page, there was, this would be under the financial summary. I have it, financial summary, page 47, first line item, category 111. The percent change is 5.52. That number doesn't match anywhere else. The gray line, the gray box, 4.89%. I think Tammy already addressed that. Problem here is I don't understand how the 5.52% increase is happening when there's no change in teachers and the average increase is 4.4. These numbers are all, I need to understand all this. We say that there's an additional administrator in here. That does not make sense because I went back and looked at your approved number for fiscal year 26. And that one for 26, you had already added the administrator. So that is the number that you had last year for the administrator, and you're asking for additional 5.5% increase. I'll leave it, I'll go on to teachers. If I can get you to page 8, I'm sorry, page 6 of your letter, this is where you describe about the enrollment. And so I just want to be clear on this. In this table,
I will tell you right now, the headers are swapped.
perfectly, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
The headers are swapped.
Perfect, okay. And so in the past, when we had projections, we actually went to an outside service to give us projections. I don't know how they do it. They go to the hospital, look at birth rates and so on. If I'm looking at this, the way, very simplistic the way you look at this, if you look at fiscal year 26, which is current year, and fiscal 27, which is next year, and we're starting this fall. If there's absolutely no change in anybody, you just basically go from the left column to the right column, but one down. It looks like that is exactly what we did for every single number. So unless that's what you guys did, or if an outside company is anticipating 0 growth on every single grade, that's kind of remarkable. So if you guys had done that, that's okay. That's okay. Essentially what you're saying is we're anticipating no growth and we're just gonna move everybody down one. That's fine. Right now, kindergarten is 50. This year, kindergarten is 60. Your early ECP program is 85. Anticipate ECP 8 to 85. There's no growth. But I think ECP is probably pre-K 3 and 4. The majority of people going from 4 probably go to kindergarten. So this is actually a question I'll have. You can address it some other time. What percentage of pre-K 4 right now go to kindergarten? Because essentially we can anticipate how large next year's kindergarten will be by this year's pre-K 4. If 90%, that's the number. We're not going to get 85 kindergarten next year. If you look at this trend, this year's kindergarten is probably the third, it's probably the smallest one in the last 4 years. We're not growing. We will be under 950 real quick. I'm gonna pause here to do the approval comparison number. You guys all, we have talked about that, and you guys can show that graphic here. However that denominator works, I don't really know, right? But the simple math is exactly what Mark said. You guys are at 30 million, 1,000 kids, it's 30. However that math works. It gets exacerbated when the top goes up and the bottom goes down. That ratio increases more quickly. The problem I have is when you do that comparison, it's not like saying we are okay. The reality is nobody is okay. Old Lyme is not okay. Clint is not okay. Westbrook is certainly not okay. So to think that we're all okay, no, that's actually a picture of everybody not being okay. But let's go the other way a little bit. We're talking about ranking. Old Lyme. I hate US News and World Report, but that's what they do. Old Lyme ranking. High school, number 8. Old Saybrook ranking, 52. It is what it is. I'm not proud of that, but those are the numbers. Food services, I am now on page. Um. I am now on page 7 of your letter. This is under the non-personnel budget. So this is, towards the end of that paragraph, this is the fiscal year 27 and so on. You're asking for an additional $38,904, $39,000. I understand this. This is page 7. Underneath the table. Yeah. Okay, my fault. Okay, page 8. Right, you guys talk about, these are the additional items that's part of what's non-personnel. $8,904, 39,000, just make numbers, for the food service, additional. And I get this, right? When you have decreasing students, the number of kids you actually serve is less, but you still have to operate a kitchen. This is actually a question. Is the level of participation the same? We can still be saying it's 30% participation, but if you have a smaller group, it's still less numbers. You get decreasing participation on top of decreasing numbers, that's a double whammy. And the other question I'd like to know is, what is the amount of that line item that is we're adding an additional 39,000 to? Because right now, this 39,000 is buried under supplies. And so I can't tell. And so at some point, how much are we basically paying for food? And I'm not objecting to that. It's an important component because I think food is important. I truly believe that at some point we should be free food for the entire state, but that's a different story. But the thing is, the increased prices for the students, they won't buy either. So it's a tough situation. I get that. The next page, so it gets to page 8. This one, I have more questions. This is your third line down, starting with second, your third line. Fiscal year 27 includes refunding of our capital maintenance plan reflecting increase of 334,662. I don't understand where that number comes from. I don't know whether this is what that is. I truly do not know where that number comes from. Right, because when I look at your capital maintenance budget, I understand the 405, which is that number on top. Pam, I just heard you say that last year when you guys hired the associate principal, you had to take money out of capital, and so you added in. So is my understanding then that this 334,000 is in addition to the 405,000 you guys are asking? Is that where it is? Because if it is, then it's buried somewhere that I can't find it.
No, if you look at the approved capital plan for this year is about 79,000.
Yeah.
And you add that to the 334, that gets you to the full ask for the capital plan for fiscal year 27.
Okay, so we'll get to the fiscal year 27 in just a second. We'll touch on the fiscal plan in just a second, because I just want to touch on one last item on this page before we get to the capital budget item. This will be the last page of your letter. This will be the variables. You make the comment that this particular year, you're about 4th line down, that you guys will no longer offset special education tuition because your per pupil cost has become so high that 4.5 times your per pupil cost is a number that you guys will not exceed. And I get that. It's unfortunate that we're there, and there's a consequence of rising numerator, decreasing denominator. You guys are in a tough situation. It's unfortunate. Last year, you guys got back $51,000 from excess cost. One question for you is actually, how much will you get this to? So you guys pointed a lot to the capital maintenance. And so if I can just basically draw your attention to the end of the book, that's where you have that. And so, and the best way to look at it is just basically the very last page, page 123. So just a couple of quick questions here, right? And so this is going to be part of the equation in terms of understanding where that 336 comes from. At some point, it doesn't matter, because some of these numbers, just, I'm not exactly sure. But this 405 includes, the high school wish list for the business part, and which is, I think, 39,338 of how people orient. This is the yellow column on page 122. And then it looks like the 40,000 is that allied health. And so built into this 405,000 is this high school refresh program, as you say. Okay, so if I understand this correctly, a couple of points here. If I understand this correctly, then right now you have already designated your capital maintenance budget for next year. We're still 16 months away, and you've already had a plan there. You're already asking almost $500,000 for next year already. And that does not include what else could come up between. And so in some ways, this is sort of a snapshot of what this wheel is going to cost. But the high school is about 280,000, and so the rest of it is other places. But then this is the operating cost. The bottom part is your named project. And so this is where you guys are basically saying, we need help from the town. I get this. Building the road, we need help. These are all the things that's coming up. Some of these things, boiler replacement, if it dies tomorrow, we gotta come up with the money, right? We can't have kids being cool. So it's gonna have to happen. In this section, I have two questions. One, they both relate to Goodwin. One is about, towards the end of the Goodwin section, Goodwin School Common Area AC, right? You have this BOE AC/IACQ fund. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I suspect AQ is air quality, the I, who knows, I don't understand. I just want to basically confirm that this is already paid, checked off, because I'm pretty sure we created a fund last year that we put in a surplus of $400,000 that should have paid off Goodwin. And so this line item should basically be wiped off, because otherwise I need to figure out what happened to last year's $400,000. But then if I can just continue, the one item before then, you guys want two more, am I read correctly? You guys want two more classrooms at Goodwin. I get that, right? There's a lot of conversations here.
That's not it. We're not looking for two more classrooms.
Okay, but you guys were just saying, okay, but I'm reading this, right? So, but you guys are saying that right now Goodwin is bursting at the seams.
The roof.
That's the roof.
It's the roof. Goodwin roof, D-wing, and two classroom addition.
My bad. Okay, so
Yeah.
that the roof goes into D-wing in addition.
And then there's,
Understood.
those
Okay.
are the oldest pieces of the roof.
Understood. Not too long ago, we moved fourth grade from the middle school to Goodwin because there was this huge. 10 years ago, the school was huge, and then it was like a hockey stick essentially. We are now the arm of the hockey stick. That the part that tips up is almost going to be gone, right? We have this huge burst at the middle school that we need to deal with. Goodwin had almost no kids left. We moved fourth grade down. There's a whole bunch of other reasons too, in terms of with their development and so on. Right now, middle school is 250 kids. It's not my business. I'm not even sure I'm doing this. Move fourth grade back up, right? And so, doing it not that long.
I heard, I was there for that.
Understood. And so, I will stop there. Oh, no, I can't. I gotta answer Susan's questions. I gotta ask Susan's question. I think it relates to Jeff's. Again, let me just ask these out. And then, I don't know whether you address this back or not, that's fine. Susan had the same question about 141 teachers. Just in terms of rough ratio, 141 divided by 990 students, that's a ratio of 1.7. It's a bad look. And I get that, right? And so she was saying, okay, that's not it. So what is the ratio at Goodwin? It's obviously not 1:7. It's probably more like 10, 12 to 1, hopefully, right? And probably a middle school is probably the same. You have fourth grade, or maybe fifth grade now. You have one LA teacher, one math teacher for the whole class. I get that. By the time you get to high school, right? At some point, you gotta make up for these ratios. So two questions. One is how many teachers do you guys have that's extra assigned to your class versus teachers you have with your specials, art teacher, music teacher, because they're not really assigned to a class, though they're still kind of, I'm trying to help you guys out to get this ratio, right? Because right now this ratio 1.7 doesn't look good, reading specialists and so on. But also at high school, I suspect that the upper classes are gonna be much smaller. French 4, I cannot believe it's 12 in the Calc AB, BC, I cannot believe it's still 12 to 1 more, right? I mean, what is that? And is there a dignity line in which guys will no longer teach? Susan had also this question about retirement, and it's the same question to basically what Jeff was asking in terms of how can you guys anticipate? When you guys were trying to look at these numbers, trying to come up with a 600,000 to 2% solution. One of the things you guys looked at was last year had budget for teachers, but when they retire and you hire new ones, they come in at lower salary. And that delta is it. And so I think that's part of this question about retirement, because can you start building that in? And it's tough to do that, but in some ways, we can take a look at this, right? I mean, I understand TRBs, you hit 37.5, you're out, right? I mean, you can keep working, but you're not getting more pensions anymore, right? And so people getting close to 37.5, you can, if you're at 35, you can almost start counting how many years they have left before they're gonna say, why am I here? I can leave and basically get paid 70% of my salary, that kind of stuff, right? And so it's possible to start doing stuff like this and so on. Anyway, those were her questions. I will stop. That's.
Can I, just one more thing, quick comment, could you give me a breakout, just bullet points of the teacher's contract? So these are the raises, but what did the cost share premium go up?
It did.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking for, just bullet points of the contract.
Yeah, we can get.
Just
We'll get you
bullets.
the
Yeah,
TA.
I'll give you, just highlights.
The TA highlight.
Yeah, that's it. And I wanna say to the Board of Finance, this is great. Thank you guys for being here, number one, because by our town charter, as you may know, and I've experienced it, this contract, this budget doesn't necessarily have to come to the Board of Finance until March 1, and there have been many years where it has. Okay, so this is a bonus conversation, not bonus, but it's a great conversation to have at this point in the process. So the Board of Selectmen, my budget is due to the board on February 15th, and then it goes to the Board of Finance. Board of Ed is more like March 1st. So thank you for getting this to us. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. And I just want to touch on a point that what's the kind of money we're talking about? And I appreciate you saying this, Pam, that every year, you know, your budget's 30 million, so when you're close enough, you're 98% close, it's pretty close. But I just want to point out some numbers here, right? I mean, what we're talking about right now, 1%, 2%, a 2% solution is $600,000. I mean, so what is that relative to 30 million? Another way to look at this though, right, is the entire town budget, round numbers, is 50 million, right? 1% is 500,000. When we're talking about a 2-3% increase, we're talking 1.5 million. So when you guys are talking about, you know, we're trying to maneuver 600,000, it is a large component of what we're trying to manage in terms of not increasing. You guys are showing tables of 25% of your student population are free reduced. I get that. We all get that. 25% of the families in the school are free reduced. They're on fixed income. We've got to manage this as best we can, right? Mark's point, it's $30,000. If I can just add up, I'm sorry, I got to add this one more, right? I think Eric asked a very good question. What is the cost of sending kids away? Very complex. I didn't realize this and I appreciate it. Magnet school is a cost, no transportation, so on. But I never heard what the real number is. I think I've heard in the past, the number's around $10,000-ish, right? Something around that. And so if I can actually take that magnet, but again, transportation, so on, stuff to do. But if I can take that number, 5 to 10,000-ish, I get the rough how many kids will go away. this is absolutely ridiculous comment, but I think people have asked me this in the past. And it's the math works. We can send our entire school away to magnet school and our budget will go down a third. When we're at 30,000 per kid and we can send away for 10,000 kids, we can send everybody away and our town budget will go down by a third for school budget. Ridiculous comment. I get that, but that is the optics that's out there. Sorry.
No, don't, I mean, interesting.
Fixed costs.
Yeah, but I will concur with Carl. Last year, the letter that you wrote to Bruce was dated March 1st. This is very early. And everything was rushed. I'm not very sure why we rushed this fast. I gave you guys time. I said, there's no reason why I need to. At this point, it has become the Board of Ed budget. Once they take it, I don't know whether you can take it back, but it is the Board of Ed budget at this point. But at some point, I'm really new to this as well. At some point, they will have to come to us and have to vote on it, but it will not be tonight. And so, but
Yeah, I don't think that was I can't speak.
no, we're totally not ready. And so, but I do want to, again, say something that we did at the beginning, that we're very grateful that you very quickly turned this around to us. Items that were able to present, so appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you for the board member. That's no.
That's hearing it out.
To the extent that we have additional questions, not keeping people here anymore tonight, but should we somehow consolidate
I
that?
think we should, right, consolidate, and we gotta figure out a process for doing that. And it was consolidate, because we cannot have a meeting outside this meeting,
Right.
so we gotta figure out how we can possibly do that, and I'll probably talk to Carl, so, yeah. I gotta read up with him, I don't know how to do this effectively, so.
Either comment, questions to be sent to the chair, the consolidation,
Yeah.
and then forward it on. So just, there'll be a public hearing in early March. The board has March really to deliberate on the budget, so if Pam and Chris, if you wanted them to come in again to answer questions and have another board update, you could do that, because it's your prerogative to do that, or any other department, police department, Leanne and I certainly, so really, you're not deliberating until March. So obviously, that can go quickly or not so quickly, but we have to advertise on the budget, so we're looking for a vote certainly by like April 1st or so. So that the budget is completed by the end of March. That's kind of roughly the timeline. It can be done, 1 year it was done, I think in mid-March. And we waited until May and we had the referendum, so it's your schedule at that point, okay?
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
And I'll leave with, in the event there's anything else we can answer, I leave it to George or Carl to. Feel free, if you have questions, like, get them to us, we're more than happy to answer the best we can, so I wanna make sure. Or kept communication line open with you folks, we're all in this situation again, so. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys, thank you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have a couple of items left, they should be quick. The next one is, we need to approve, take action on the police department, both the bridge, like the last time we met, we had talked about that, it was just come up, whether we approve it, we need to make a motion on it and approve it, and so on, so. Would somebody can make a motion, I have no motion.
Oh, I can read it.
Please do, yes, go ahead.
I make a motion to appropriate $201,000 from the police vehicle purchase fund, Fund 3033, for the purchase of 3 police vehicles. And same motion, will also appropriate $66,000 in the police outside services fund, Fund 2825, for the purchase of 2 outboard engines for the Marine One police boat.
Yes, second. Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays? I think motion is carried. Thank you very much.
I have about 25 minutes.
Take a whole hour, Mark.
Actually, can I ask a really quick question about?
Tires when you go out.
So, we just, and it's great that we approved this, but I'm curious. In the motion to approve that, we didn't talk about what type of vehicle. In the past, I think we ran into this with the fire department. And the previous board wanted exact specifics on what they're gonna buy, Yamaha engines, all of that. Are we not doing that anymore?
Well, it's, yeah, they are Yamaha Indians, I know that.
Understand that, but it wasn't in the motion.
Okay.
And that
Oh,
was
I
a
see.
big thing
Was it?
a year or two ago where I was of the mindset that we shouldn't do that. We should allocate the money and let them, if they want Yamaha's Mercuries, if they want Tahoe's Expeditions, let them make that decision. But so is that what we're gonna do? Is keep it general. It's,
Yeah, that's what you just did.
yeah, I know, I agree,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Providing
They
a
did,
motion.
right, and they did, previously, we have all the details of what.
And I'm all for it. I guess I'm asking moving forward, right? When
Yeah, moving forward.
somebody comes in here and says, we wanna buy this, are we gonna
Right.
make them say?
I-
Billy Claffey comes in and says, I wanna buy a new plow truck. Are we gonna say, yeah, it has to be an F-350 dually, blah, blah,
Well, I think that should be the precursor to the motion, and maybe the motion says, as per the Public Works Director's recommendation. In a memo dated March 13th or something, maybe it's something like that. But for these, I mean, I think for this, I think we know what was. They're predisposed to getting, and that was pickup truck, 2 Tahoes, and the Yamaha engine, so.
Yeah, 100%.
I know that, and, but moving forward, maybe there is more detail in the motion.
I'm not saying that we should have it. I'm saying we should have, I've argued this before.
You wanna know what you're buying.
We should have faith in the people running our departments to say, you wanna buy vehicles, buy the vehicles, here's the money, right? I mean,
But-
so.
With some certainty as to what you're buying, I think.
Yeah, if I could jump in, first of all, I wanna thank the police chief. I don't know if you talked to him or just happened to see the video. Are you on, chief? Thank you.
Yes.
This is exactly what I was looking for. You sent the video, save us the trip down there, you sent the explanation. That's what I wanted, so that when people say, Mark, why do they have those vehicles? I can say, because they need them, because we're unique. We're on, the river and the sound. And just thank you very much, because this is exactly, and I didn't even officially reach out to ask you yet, and you already did it, so thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to have open line of communication, so I can do that for you. So
Yeah.
please feel free to ask.
Okay,
Okay, that's a good point. So thanks.
so we'll skip my report.
Thank you.
Happily.
Thank you.
Public comment?
Did you guys vote on that motion?
We did.
Yes.
Okay.
You? Oh, we're for it.
So it is a vote.
There was no public.
Thank you. Comments from board members? No, comments from the chair? No, thank you so much, guys. I mean, it's been a long night and a long process. I think this is the last one, so I really appreciate it.
What's that?
I'm asking you if you have comment, because it's for both of you.
Oh. No,
No.
I concur with George, the weather's been so lousy, it's a good time to actually just do this as opposed to when it's nice out, but, that's kind of the way I look at it. So, your other deliberations will be in March and on the budget itself. Leanne and I made some quick tweaks today and I'll explain those at, another meeting, but nothing major.
So this is the first time I'm chair, so I'm gonna need some guidance in terms of what happens next. Right? But it doesn't, it will not need to, actually does not need to happen.
Yeah, well, you have another, wait, what is it? February 3rd, so you'll have a meeting on the 17th.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it then.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 hours. Someone can give me a quick sheet on
Yep.
what I need to
Yeah,
do.
give
Because
us
I,
calendar.
yeah, but that's more than that, hopefully, because like.
Yeah.
We'll do this and that will want to not just follow.
You need a cheat sheet.
I know. the sheet.
yourself to do a crib sheet.
Crib sheet,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe you could come in or meet with Carl and he could walk you through.
Thank you.
Okay,
He's got it done.
you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much. Any motion to adjourn? Thank you very much. Second?
And we're adjourned.
Thank you. Yeah, good night, guys.